I love to see the towns passing by and to ride these rails neath God's blue sky. Let me travel this land from the mountains to the sea, 'cause that's the life I believe He meant for me. And when I'm gone and at my grave you stand, say God called home your rambling man.
Welcome to Ramblin' Man Podcast episode number 83. This one's with Keir DuBois, and we talk about music and education and maps. Really good talk. I've known Keir for a long time. Great dude. Lives in Southern California. If you'd like to learn more about Keir, you can find his website at keirdubois.com. That's KEIRDUBOIS.com. And on there, there's outbound links to his social media. Make sure you give those a follow. On most platforms, it's at Keir DuBois, spelled the same, or Keirtography, which is KEIRTOGRAPHY. And again, those links are on his website too. But give him a follow. Make sure you tell him Ramblin' Man sent you. Sponsor this week is Feral Giant. Feral Giant is a graphic design, illustration, and social media consultation company based here in Knoxville, Tennessee. Though they do work for clients big and small all over the country, all over the globe, in fact. But they also do photography, videography, video editing, and audio editing, website design, SEO, writing, content development. Hell, they'll babysit your kids if it nets them money. So make sure you give them a follow on social media on either Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn at Feral Giant. And be sure to give them an email today and hire them for your next project. Without much further ado, here's the episode.
It looks like something that they would hear on what was it on the Current? What's that show on the Current? Transmission with DJ Jake Rude. My wife listens to it all the time. It's like new wave, post-punk, alternative stuff from 78 to 85. It's stuff that we never like. There's shit in there that I have not heard for 35 years.
Okay. Well, I tried it. So it was Yaz with Only You.
Okay. I know Yaz. I know I couldn't pick them out. I just know that one of the guys used to be in Depeche Mode or something like that.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
I think so. Like the original, one of the he was in Depeche Mode for their first album and then he bailed. Okay.
Well,
don't quote me on that. That may or may not be true, but I know that there is a guy who was on Depeche Mode's first album and then he bailed.
Okay.
Fuck. I should look this up now. It's.
I'm looking. No, you're right. Vince Clarke.
Okay.
Former Depeche Mode member Vince Clarke and Alison Moyet.
Yeah. Okay.
Alison Moyet.
Yeah.
So my playlist for her, and this is just me going through stupid shit, was Yaz with Only You, Shakespeare's Sister with Stay, Mazzy Star, Fade Into You, Sky Ferrara, Everything is Embarrassing, Roxette, It Must Have Been Love.
See, now, out of all those, I know who Sky Ferrara is, but I've never actually heard any of her music.
And it's actually newer, but that song, Everything is Embarrassing, sounds like a song from the 80s. Like,
it's one of those. It's like one of the revival.
Yeah.
The revival gets the sound more than the actual era of the sound, right?
Right. Yeah. And then Peter Gabriel, Sledgehammer, Peter Gabriel and Kate Bush, Don't Give Up, Peter Gabriel, In Your Eyes. A lot of those were like, I want to get her reaction to the videos because the videos are so fucking weird.
Yeah.
The Monkees.
Like the Sledgehammer claymation one?
Yep.
Or something?
Yeah.
Okay.
Monkees, Porpoise Song, Randy Newman, both Sail Away and I Think It's Gonna Rain Today. Kate Bush, Running Up That Hill, Patti Smith, Because the Night.
Yeah.
And Garbage's Queer. Those are just the feed started feeding me those. And I was like, you know what? I think all of these, except for Peter Gabriel, are strong women. So this will be a good start. Is she's going to make me listen to fucking Ariana Grande and Justin Bieber, but I'm going to feed her like good, strong women from the 80s.
What was the one? There was, and I get this now because of like all these kids that I follow who are also now, they weren't at the time, but that they are now alumni of the UCSB student newspaper.
Okay.
So they're all into that shit, and they're all, you know, they're people of color, and so they know all kinds of stuff that I've never been exposed to at all. But I know who Ariana Grande is. I've just never heard her music.
Nope.
So there was this one. What was this? The Positions album? Is that her album? I don't know.
I don't know.
Anyway, they're having the kind of debates over it that we would have over fucking Kid A or something, you know, or like, and it's like, okay, I understand that context, right? It's like, okay, that this is supposed to be something that was going to blow your mind, and then you were let down.
Oh my God. That's
we did that
hilarious.
at school. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
But they're 22. So it's like, okay, I get the context. So.
Well, and it's a weird thing of like, I have a theory on this, which is why like kids now don't get like Joe Walsh. They'll never know who Joe Walsh is. But we learned who Joe Walsh was because there was such a limited amount of music and you could only listen to it like on record or tape or the radio.
Yeah.
That you had to dig in your dad's records or your mom's records or your uncle's records or your older brother or sister's records, and that's how you found that stuff. Whereas kids now, it's no, I'm just going to put on a Spotify playlist that has Ariana Grande like stuff.
Right. So
like
that
I never have to go backwards. I never have to go backwards.
Yeah. And it's so like there was an interview with Eno where he was talking about, I think, and this was maybe at least 10 years ago now. It was definitely iPod era, where he was talking about his daughters and how they have so much music at their fingertips, and sometimes they go for it and sometimes they really don't.
Yeah.
Which is like, I'm sure it's just a more expanded version of what we did. Like I knew the first song that I knew of Joe Walsh was Vote for Me, which was like, I don't know, 92-ish. And it was like a goofy solo track. It was like, a vote for me is a vote for me. And I just know that just because it was like on KLOS on the, you know, the goofy commute show, you know, right after they'd play Bang the Drum, they'd play, or whatever, they'd play, you know, Vote for Me, just some goofy shit that my dad would listen to. And he wouldn't, you know, it's like, all right, this is just, it was his Weird Al.
Right.
Kind of
right. So. Yeah. I think about that. What was it? The Doobie Brothers that they did. Shit, now I'm going to forget. They did two songs that were very similar. And one of them was China Grove and one of them was something else. And one of them came out in like the late 80s, early 90s. And the other one came out in the 70s. And I remember hearing like the 80s or 90s version of that song. And then talking to my dad, he was like, that's the same damn song they did 20 years ago. I was like, oh, sorry.
So here's some Doobies trivia for you. And I don't even remember which member it was. Yeah. But my graduation at UCSB was at the very same time as one of their sons. So like somewhere in there, there's a Dubois and then there's a Doobie brother. So which is funny because like was what I was called in high school, is like once, you know, people wanted to call my brother and I the Doobie Brothers, and we were like, no, until we realized that a doobie was a joint, and we're like, okay, yeah, that'll work. So anyway,
that's funny. I'm
going to ramble. I'm going to take advantage of this format, man. I will just ramble and digress on your ass.
And I will say we are actually going at this point. So now I'm trying to find it. I can't find it. China Grove was from 73, but there's another song that was like, I guess it's one of these in like the late 89 or 91 that Dad was like, nah, this is a remake of China Grove is exactly what this is. But
it's their long tail Egyptian decline period, right? Yeah.
The Doobie. I don't have a problem with Doobie Brothers, man. They're one that it's like, I can't remember if I told you this before. Like I grew up in a house that my parents did not have great reverence for the Beatles, the Stones, Springsteen. I'm trying to think anybody else really big that they just didn't give a shit about. But it was also like Dad loved Pink Floyd and Charlie Daniels Band and Otis Redding and Curtis Mayfield, all that shit. So I did get exposed to good music. ZZ Top, fucking ZZ Top's amazing. Yeah. And but it was just Beatles and Beatles, Stones, Springsteen are the three I remember, because I remember him saying Springsteen's too goddamn political. I don't want to hear that shit. Yeah. And then Beatles is like, oh, they think they're better than everybody else, so fuck them.
Now, see, this is like this here is a superficial consequence of me not speaking with my father for 25 years. Oh. Because he had Beatles and Stones and Dylan and all that stuff, but his gap was, and where I had no knowledge of it, was Zeppelin. There were no Zeppelin albums in his collection, and even worse for my uncle, my mother's sister's husband, because he was a jazz head and an old blues guy, and so he was a really fucking snob about Zeppelin. Like he just hated them. But my mom and my aunt had these jokes where, because they grew up with show tunes, and my grandparents were not very musical people at all. They were they were brilliant creative people in other ways. They just were not into music. Like my grandfather would hum the same 3 show tune lyrics when he would do dishes, and that would be it.
Would he hold up a plate and do "Hello, my baby"? Hello, my
no, he would he would forget that he dropped the knife to the bottom of the soapy sink, and he'd cut his fingers on it. So you have all these show tunes that would be punctuated by curses because he would cut himself. And God. so my mom's joke was, and my mom and my aunt would say this too. That's like, my mom would say, "Well, we didn't know about rock and roll until I married your father," and then my aunt would say, "I didn't know about jazz until I married your uncle."
Wow.
And my uncle I'm still in touch with. My aunt and uncle live in Santa Fe, and my uncle Jefferson Kingsley Davis,
nice,
who grew up in Berkeley as a hippie. So he always got shit when he would be like late to class or something. His teacher would say, "What happened? You lose the war?" And he'd be like, "Ha ha ha." But my uncle Jeff is responsible for my brother and I being able to record our own music, because he got us a Tascam 4-track in 1996, and that was the end of the story. That was it. And he's a guitar gearhead too, so I got to show him my new Mandocello. He'll be stoked.
Oh, and before I forget, I need to tell you about a friend of mine. Makes guitar pedals here in Knoxville. Hologram pedals, and apparently is hologram electronics.
Okay,
that's what they're called, and apparently they are massive, because Radiohead on the regular buys pedals from them.
Hologram electronics. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me, because I'm going to clue in my brother on this too, because when he goes electric, because Bryn's been on an acoustic binge for at least 15 years, much longer than I have, because he's into all the sea shanties and shit. So he hasn't used his electric pedal. But when we were in bands together, he and the other guitar player, Brian, our lead guitar player, they had pedals out the wazoo. They would go onto, I don't remember what this site was called, but it was like a 2002 dinky site where it would be like you put in all the pedals that your rig has, and it would show it in graphic form. It would this goofy Vox amp, and then you're just like, oh, you have these Boss pedals, and then you have these Electro Harmonics pedals. And so anyway, Hologram Electronics.
Yes, my buddy Ryan. He was actually in a band that they got to play some shows, open for, oddly enough, the Black Keys. Like they opened for the Black Keys. They were on Letterman, which we did not know until like 3 weeks ago. He was like, "Oh yeah, we were on Letterman." And I was like, "What the fuck, dude? You were on Letterman?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "I got to meet everybody." He's like, "Paul Schaefer came up and asked me questions about my rig."
See, that's when you know you've made it, right?
Yeah, because he does keyboards.
Yeah. And
Paul was coming up, and he was like, and he's also like a computer nerd, so he had done all this crazy shit to make something work, to where he was operating, you'll love this, he was operating the bass on his keyboard through a computer rig. And so at the end, Paul Schaefer came up and was like, how did you do that? Like, and just had all these questions for him.
Yeah.
And he started explaining it. Then he was just like, that's fucking Paul Schaefer. That's Paul Schaefer. Like, what the fuck? What is my life?
Me about my rig.
Yeah. So it's, but
what was the name of the band again?
The Royal Bangs.
The Royal Bangs. Okay.
I'm going to double check that because it's another one of those, God love Knoxville. Knoxville has a tremendous music scene that nobody talks about except for the nerds that are here, that are really into music.
Yeah.
And with some people, they're there. Fuck. Okay. So the main photo is of my buddy Ryan. The little thumbnail is my buddy Ryan. Like, that's hilarious. Nice. So I'm going to send this to you because I need to leave this up so I can see it because I have not watched this yet.
Okay.
So I'm going to send it to you. There you go. I sent it to you in chat. But yeah, I was trying to remember which band it was that was on Letterman, but it was the Royal Banks. Like, they got signed to a major label and all that shit. Like, it's kind of crazy. And now he makes those pedals, Hologram Electronics. And shout out, God, he just got a free ad on Ramblin' Man. I'll tell me he owes me a pedal that I can then resell. Good dude, though. Sweet. It's kind of, that's one of those, here is Knoxville to a T. So Ryan is, I don't know, 35. God, I hope he doesn't listen to this and be like, I'm not 35, you asshole. I think he is like 35 to 40, let's say. I worked with his mom at the paper for like 2 years, and I've known and met his dad a lot because his dad is one of the early adopters of using social marketing within social media, and has written like a bunch of books and shit on it. And so we got to talking one night, and he was like, yeah, my mom and my dad. I was like, wait, your last name's Schaefer? And he was like, yeah. I was like, is your dad Mark? He was like, yeah. I was like, is your mom Kathy? And he was like, yeah. Why? And I was like, holy shit, dude. I was like, good God, man. I knew your mom in like 2006. Like, this is hilarious. Like, that's Knoxville to a T. Like, everybody is fucking connected.
Yeah. See, that, like, for Ventura, it would be, and I can say this now about Ventura because I've lived here for 16 years, but Ventura, it's like that. It's like, oh, you know them too? All right. Cool. And like, we never say anything else about them ever, like, just because it's like people are so cliquey here in weird ways, not necessarily in bad ways, but just in weird, like, passive ways. Like there was the firm that I worked for when I first moved here. I worked for them for 9 years, and then I didn't hear a thing. And then the firm, the woman who hired me, who owned it, she sold it. And then like 4 years later, this year, she ran for city council. And it blew my mind. I just like, oh, okay. It's like, how many people by that name do you know in this town? Oh, that must be, I guess it is. She did not win. But, but it's like, all right, well, there's somebody on city council who might not like me. So that's a bummer. Because I left, I was done with that. By the time I was there for 9 years because it was part of the recession.
Yeah.
And I just didn't know, it was my first design gig. And so I didn't really know much about the industry. And so I didn't really realize that I could take charge of my own career and say, no, I don't want to do this anymore. So I'm going somewhere else. But anyway.
Yeah. I was thinking about this the other day. Like, there's a company that I used to work for that they actually have a designer position open, with, fuck, man, it's December and we're still dealing with this COVID shit and people are not, releasing their budgets. It's hard as shit for an independent designer. And I was looking at that. I was like, man, can I really go back to that company and work? And I'd done some contract work for them before. And I thought about it. And around the same time I was thinking about my sister, they have a giant call center at that company. And my little sister has worked in call centers since she was 22 or something. She's like, oh, I just applied out there. And I thought about for a second, I was like, I would work in the call center before I would work in that design department. again.
Oh.
I was like, this is why I don't work at companies. This is why I'm having problems with certain people that we don't talk about on mic is I was like, because y'all are all, you don't, I don't want to say you're not doing it right, but you're not being honest. It's not about the work. It's not about, any of that shit. It's about everything, all the ancillary shit.
All this. Yeah. The reason why I left that particular firm was not because of the people who owned it or people where I really liked all those people.
Yeah.
I still do. It was the clientele. I didn't want to work with those clients or those projects anymore. I'd had it with doing websites and being on call as if I were a web host or something, which I wasn't. I was miserable. I had screamed at my favorite intern once. I made her cry. It was no good. And at that point I was just like, what is wrong with you? You need to get out of here.
Yeah.
Anyway, and so I went to a job where I needed to commute for. So then, then the commute kicked my ass.
I was going to say,
because you were talking about going back to work for a company, and one of my buddies from my AIGA board was going to recommend me to another company in Santa Barbara, and I was like, do I want to go back to a company?
Yeah.
Do I want to go back to a company in Santa Barbara that I have to commute for? I don't know. I've had 2 jobs this year, just 2 jobs, right?
Yeah.
But I still like being my own boss. I still like being able to, cook dinner for my wife when she's done with school and she's fucking exhausted,
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's, when I worked for this one company, there's a friend of mine who's an engineer that I was getting upset about something, as I'm wont to do. I'm sure you've never seen that. But he just looked at me one time. He let me talk, and Gailey is like, God, I'm trying to think. He's 55 or something at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And he's worked, a bunch of different places. He's an engineer, and he looked at me and he was like, look at it this way. You don't have cancer. Or no, he gave me 3 great nuggets. One of them came from another guy, Darren. He was like, Darren said to me one time, it's just dog collars when I was working for the pet company.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, it's just dog collars.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we killing ourselves with stress? And then that's when he came up with you don't have cancer.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck? And then his last thing was just write your complaints on the back of the check. Just write your complaint. And all 3 of those together, like I used to keep them on a Post-it note in my cube. Anytime I'd get, start to get hulked out, I would just be like, I don't have cancer.
I don't know. Yeah.
It's just dog collars, and who gives a shit?
Yeah.
The flip side, the only problem to that is there are times now where I'll go pitch clients and it'll be that on-demand shit. And they'll be like, we do that. I was like, it's not the end of the world. I actually flipped it to, we're not curing cancer. Mm-hmm. You're selling widgets. Mm-hmm. And who gives a shit? Like,
well, the widget, but you're also like, the widget is your time, and the widget is your health and sanity. And I don't know. You're right. It's that trade-off. It's like when my wife and I first met each other 22 something years ago, her dad was managing a Starbucks, and he was like, he'd come home and say, it's just fucking coffee.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just coffee.
Yeah.
And it's, but you have to also double that with, since we provide a service and the only thing we charge for is our time, then that's what has to be valuable for us. And if it's not, I don't know. I mean, everybody has a price, right? But like the thing that you and I were talking about before we went on the air is like, that's where I would just start to be saying, all right, is this really worth what I'm going to get paid for it? I mean, is all this silliness worth that?
Well,
and I'm not going to tell you how to run your business because I've had 2 jobs this year.
Yeah.
So.
Well, when it comes to that thing, I am still, at the end of the day, I love saying this, a man, a Southerner, and a Collins man. And those 3 will hunt you till the end of the earth until you pay me my $2. I'm going to use a movie quote. Pay me my $2. To where I was talking to a friend of mine about it, and I told him, I was like, dude, let's say they want to pay 3/4 of that bill. Mm-hmm. I'll say, okay, send me a check. And then the minute I get that check and cash that check, I'll send them an invoice for the remainder. Mm-hmm. And I will send it to the owner of the company and everyone I have an email address for. and I will send it every 15 days. And then I will call his cell phone every 16th day. And it's like, hey, just wanted to make sure you got that invoice for the remainder. Because I'm not a dickhead. It's just, if it had another zero on the end, maybe I could understand. But because it's so inconsequential, I am going to waste. I look at it the other way. I am going to waste as much as his time and his employees' times as humanly possible until he pays me. And I am, again, a man, a Southerner, and a Collins man. Because here's a little wisdom from Dad.
Yeah.
So Dad is one of the nicest human beings on the planet. I've seen people pull into our driveway, which was not it was kind of on a quick road to where it was not easy to pull, and walk down like we were outside and say, hey man, I need money for gas. Can you give me money? And he walk inside, come back out with $20 and give them to them when he didn't have the $20 to give to them. Like, that's my dad. But if he then saw those people at the gas station buying beer with that $20, the rage, like it would almost be like if you were on fire, he wouldn't piss on you. He wouldn't even get more gasoline. He'd sit there and watch it burn and laugh at your ass, like scorched earth mentality. So I've got that. Yeah. And I'm a little meaner than my dad. So when it comes to shit, I'm just like, and I've had that going back to companies. Like I've had that at companies. I was like, no, this is the right thing to do. You don't want to do that because you need to get your way. You need to sign off that you are awesome. Cool. I don't give a shit. We need to do the right thing. Like I'm so adamant about, no, just do the right thing, man. It's the easiest thing. Just do the right thing. Like it drives me nuts, but.
Well, no, it's as long as it doesn't get into. Well, no, I won't. I shouldn't talk about that because there are people that should not probably be talked about that way. No. Because people who are in under their current circumstances would probably not appreciate having their justifiable problems made public.
Yeah.
So.
It's I think my dad was very black and white on like just doing the right thing. So I think that's where all that I don't need a therapist. I know that's exactly where that comes from is no, just do the right thing and be good to people. And if and he's a big guy and he raised me and I'm a big guy. So it's been a lot of putting dudes into walls at concerts because they touched their woman. Or because they got a little too close. And one of my buddies reminded me, he was like, oh yeah, there was that one time where the guy got in his girlfriend's face and went to hit her, and you literally just picked him up with one hand up off the ground, walked him like 10 yards and punched him into the wall to where I thought he was going to go through the wall. I was like, yeah, that's dad right there. Yeah. That's my dad just being like, you're going to use your size as a positive for other people.
See, for me at this point, it's like whenever I do something that like I know is that I get from my father, it's always something passive aggressive, or I'm very disappointed in you, son, anyway, it's. But when you mentioned therapy, have you ever tried it?
No,
no. I don't say this as a therapy evangelist, by the way. I mean, my uncle, who is one of my only male role models, he is a psychiatrist. But I don't mention this as something like that I should do, because I also feel like I've never needed it. Like I've done other things, like it's taken me longer to get through my own shit. But like writing a little song about it, like cramming that problem into 3 verses and a chorus and a bridge, maybe if it's a big problem. It's like a little voodoo doll that I can sit there and poke later, but because I did like when my parents separated, my mom went to therapy, and she had us, to her credit, she wanted us to go too. But to her credit, she also said, if you go once and you don't like it, you don't ever have to go again.
Okay.
I went once, I didn't like it, and I never went again. And
I think it's not to go back to the black and white thing, but I've spent a lot of time and reflection on what issues are I can give an example like somebody I'm connected to on LinkedIn who owns a small firm in another city sent me an invite to an online Christmas party for them. And then one of my friends on Facebook sent me the same thing. And I looked at it and I was like, I met that dude from LinkedIn at a networking event. And he mentioned because one of his junior designers is a big fan of mine, which sounds arrogant as fuck, but that's okay.
No. At this point, we need to revel in that shit.
Yeah. So because she likes every photo, she comments and she is like a fresh out of school. But I know that, again, I'm someone that she looks up to as a designer. So he saw my name, he literally walked past me and then circle back around as I was talking to 5 other financial assholes. And he looked at my name. He was like, "You're the Feral Giant." I was like, "I am the Feral Giant." I was like, "I fucking love that, man." And he was like, "I don't even think I had Feral Giant on my name tag." But he was like, "Yeah, so-and-so keeps mentioning you around the office that we need to work with you." I was like, "Yeah, give me a business card, brother. I'll do it." And so, I was like, what is it? Community over competition.
Yes,
so I got his business card, and at that networking event, there were very few people that I responded to, and he was one of them. I think there were only 2 or 3 people that I responded to because it was all financial people or bank people. I sent him an email. He did not respond. So I waited a week. I went back, found my email, forwarded it, sent it again, and I never heard back from him. So here's my question about a therapist. So my thing is, fuck that guy. I was like, if he can't respond with an email, then fuck that guy. And he's out of my head. I don't think about him.
Yeah.
So when it comes to a therapist, I think, so what is the cure there? There is no cure there. Should I email him and say, "Hey, dude, you should have emailed me back"? No, fuck that. Just
no. The idea, as I understand it, and this is as a layperson, the idea is that
didn't you know your topic was therapy? I'm just kidding.
It can be. It'll be just this spew of bullshit.
Quickest rambling man ever.
Quickest. That's, as I understand it, it's like you talk it to get it out of your head because something is blocking your thought process about it, or something is blocking your understanding about it. And so the therapist is somebody who will kind of help you figure it out.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's a real, I'm sure that's a huge streamlining of, and simplification of it. But I've never, there have maybe been 2 or 3 things in my life where I've really needed somebody else's help to figure it out. Yeah. But eventually I got through it. And if the fuck that guy method works for you, then that's what you should do. I'm
going to pull a little Yiddish. I look at it as that's his mishigas. That's his craziness. That's his shit to work through, not my shit to work through. I just don't give a shit about that guy. I just don't. But I see that and I'm like, oh, I need to disconnect from him on LinkedIn because fuck that guy. I just don't care. There's only so much room in my brain and I can't let a little fire burn right here because that one dude didn't email me back twice.
Yeah.
That's not worth my time.
No, it's now it's reminding me of somebody that I have not emailed back, and I probably should. And it's been a month, and it's kind of a relatively urgent thing about a map. And so if that person is listening, I'm sorry, I will email you back.
So I will say, I hit a point, I think it was 2 months ago, where I realized, and this is something you'll totally understand. I took on work for friends that I was doing for free. So because of everything going on and hustling and trying all this, those 2 jobs kept getting pushed to the bottom of the pile. And it was holy shit, a year has gone by on both these jobs and I haven't touched them. And so I texted both the people and I was like, hey, I'm a complete asshole. And I'm sorry that I didn't do this. And if you still want me to do it, I will take it on right now and we will get this shit done. But if not, and you want to tell me to go fuck myself, I'm totally fine with that. I completely understand. I fucked up here. One of them got back to me and said, what are you even talking about? Did you mean to send this to me? I was like, yeah, it's you for your YouTube thing. And she was like, oh, fuck that. If I really needed it, I would have bugged you more.
Yeah.
And the other guy never got back to me.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, I went 1 for 2 there. And she was like, no,
Yeah.
don't worry about that. She was like, if shit happens, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And she was like, if I had really needed it, I would have bothered you about it. I was like, okay. The other guy I've not talked to him in like a year. So,
Ooh, okay.
but it also is one of those things to where this is no, what do you call it? Excuse. But it's like, dude, if you really needed that and said, hey, man, I need this by the end of the month, I would have figured out a way to get it done. But because he was always like, it's no big deal. Just do it whenever you have time.
Then you don't treat it like a big deal, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah. That's why I kept getting pushed down to the bottom of the pile. Plus, it was a website to where I needed content from him, and he never sent that too. So, not making excuses. I should have.
Right. But it's like, it's been under the bridge. It's down. It's like it went to the ocean at this point.
But to the point, like what you were saying about you need to email that person back. For me, I put those 2 issues out there. It's like, look, I'm a dickhead. I'm sorry. If you want to forgive me, cool. If not, I understand. I don't even think about that. Next time I see him, I'm going to be like, hey, man, I'm still an asshole and I feel really bad. And, I never expect you to forgive me. And I totally understand. But it's almost like I've hoisted that more on him than me, to where it's like, no,
you've forgiven yourself for fucking up, and it's gone. Yeah.
And it's gone.
Yeah.
I don't know. Fuck, I don't know. That's all the. So today we're going to spend 3 hours discussing the Yeah 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 song Maps in great detail.
Yes, that's true. and we can talk about how they don't have a bass player, which that always seems to be the thing that people drop, right? White Stripes dropped it. They don't need a bass player. The Doors didn't need a bass player, but fuck the Doors. And Yeahs didn't have a bass player, but
White Stripes or Black Keys, Jeff the Brotherhood,
Keys,
like those.
I try not to take any of that shit personally. What's it? The Celebration Rock, Japan Droids. Did Japan Droids have? Yeah, it's whatever.
So here's
for me, right?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Before we actually dive into the actual topic, because it is rambling. Here's a question for you as a musician. I have great admiration for a band like Green Day, to where it's 3 dudes on a stage, and I feel like the shit that Billy Joe is doing with both singing and playing guitar boggles my mind. Because you see other bands that have, a rhythm guitarist, 2 lead guitarists, and they're not doing it as fast or as intense or whatever, or as good as he is. And I feel like that kind of gets lost in the shuffle. But I think there are a lot of bands with like 3 members. I'm like, you guys just get it done. Like, you all need to be vaulted more than some of these other people. Am I nuts? Or
the police are not critically favored these days, but they fucking did it for sure.
Yeah.
And they not only did it, but they dumbed themselves down to do it because of the trends of the time, where you weren't supposed to be a good proficient musician, and then you had these 3 guys who were really fucking good at what they did. And then they would do things like on it was either Ghost in the Machine or Synchronicity, one of the latter album tours, where they had 2 background singers, or they would have Sting's vocals on playback or something like that, in ways that like don't make sense as a like that's obviously Sting on a playback. Why? I mean, sure, have playback if it helps you make the song, but I always attributed that stuff, at least in their case, to Miles Copeland, the asshole manager and Stewart's older brother, just because he's an asshole, and he would suggest dumb shit like that. But for as somebody who is not a good musician, meaning myself, like I'm not I've learned and forgotten how to read music 3 times. It is not my career. It's just it's my hobby, and I play bass guitar, which is a dumb instrument. And singing and playing at the same time, which I did for a little while in my second band. It was hard. I had to dumb down the bass parts to, they'd just be basic either eighth notes or root notes. And that was when I was still trying to, with me, that was all about just asserting my control or my power over the song. Especially if it was one of my songs and I wanted it sung a certain way. And that band, that was Honey White. There were like two parts of Honey White. There was the part where my brother and I were still trying to control everything and do things the way they should be done. But then the second half was the drummer Bill and Brian, the lead guitar. When Brian became a lead guitar, and both of them are like, no, that's not going to work for us anymore. And they were very tactful and very, not passive about it, but very subtle. So to where the second half of Honey White was what Honey White was supposed to sound like, where I took a step back and I focused on my bass parts and I let my brother do his awesome, Tom York, Jeff Buckley vocals, and Bryn. And Bryn took a step back and didn't do as much lead guitar. He just let Brian do his great David Gilmour, Neil Young shit. And I paid attention to the bass parts, and I paid attention to the drums, and I learned how to be a better bass player by not trying to do a bunch of things at once. But if Green Day is doing what they're doing and it works for them, obviously it's working for them for 30 years now or whatever. Then more power to him. But as in my case, as an amateur musician, it served my band and the material better if I kept myself to one role on any given song. Like especially even if they're the ones that I wrote. Like I could just trust my brother to sing stuff the way he was going to sing it, and it would be better or more inventive or whatever than I would do it. Like, and Bryn had this great phrase that he used one time for one of our latter songs. He's like, yeah, all I did was write the chords and the lyrics, and I knew you guys would do something cool with it. You just do something cool with it when we get together and play, and you come up with an arrangement and have your great parts, and it would work. And he was right, and it worked. And so that's, and then, within a year of that, the band fell apart because we all moved to different places, and we were at that point where if we really wanted to make it, we could have pushed it, but none of us wanted to push it that way. It was just not interesting to us. The things that we would have to do and the amount of work that it would have to be, and the compromises that we would make in various ways, we're just like, no, we're done. We'll get together and, make it special when we rehearse, but we're done. So
I've seen, because I'm friends with so many musicians and bands around here, it's insane to me how many are in this weird place to where they can do a small tour around the region over the course of, a long weekend, but they all still have day jobs, they all still, and it's almost like they're never going to crest to that next level.
Yeah.
But also, can they go up that next level? And
that's that was the question that we never knew the answer to for us. It was just because the only one of us who had ever actually toured was Billy, was the drummer, when he was in different bands in Colorado. And he's like, touring sucks, man. You don't want to do it. And we never, I didn't, I have no concept of what it's like to tour. And to just fall out of reality into a whole other different reality. But I'm glad that I don't, because a bunch of things probably would have suffered and I would have been a totally different person. And it's not my default setting. Like the AIGA president Keir, Keir's president face that I would put on to go to the conferences and shit like that. That's not my natural setting. It's fun, and I could get really addicted to it. And I was telling Taylor Kinsler on her podcast, I got seduced by that. I want to go to all these conferences where people love me. And put that face on. And then, but when I come back home and my wife is like, what the fuck are you doing? That's not you. And he's like, well, and I would say that is me. It's just not a part of me that I get to show off very much because it's psychologically dangerous. And I was in touch with that part of me a little bit when I was in bands, and it didn't work well then either. I was a bad band manager, and you can't act like a rock star, or at least the ways that I did, if you are somebody who looks the way that I do at the time. I was a big chubby bald guy at the time.
Hey now.
Well, no,
Some
no,
of
no.
us are still chubby bald guys.
So no, and Frank Black made the world safe for all of us that way. I will acknowledge his leadership in that
Oh
field.
man.
But I can't scream the way he can.
No.
Um,
I can, but it would take a bunch of kicks to the nads to scream them.
Have you ever seen them?
No, they're one, and I feel weird now that Kim Dill's gone. To where I'm like, is this really the same? Like this?
Oh well, no, because I didn't go see their reunion tours at all. I just that would be weird. No, I saw about 20 years ago. I saw Frank Black and the Catholics at like a little small joint in Santa Barbara, and he didn't have to move. He didn't like take a deep breath in or anything. He would just throw his head back and scream, and suddenly it's like, holy shit, that is Black Francis. You know, it's just like that's. And there's no effort in it at all. And it just blew my mind. Anyway, that's I
was going to say, that's kind of how I feel. Do you know Pedro the Lion, David Bazan?
I know of them. I don't know their music well.
To where I've seen him perform solo, and it's same thing. Like they're nothing like the Pixies, but him stepping back and letting that go. It's kind of an amazing thing to see.
But at this point in his career, it's his thing. It's like like Frank Black had been doing it for 30 years at that point. So it's just like he knows where to go to get that energy. Yeah. If he needs to do it. And that's something that you learn if you've been doing it every day for however long. And I think that was at that point too, where that generation of musicians started to they started to separate themselves from the people who quote unquote grew up and had families and settled down, because some of them just don't. Some of them, they become, the BB King or the Dylan of their era, where they will play 180 shows a year until they drop. Until they're done. And it's interesting to see who that has become for like the grunge generation or the hip hop generation or whoever. Yeah. And I don't know who that's going to be now. And it'll be fun to watch because it won't be me.
Yeah. That's like, I'm curious. I would be curious to see what Kurt Cobain's career would have been had he stayed alive. Like,
you know what? If it's by any, I mean, I know that these are not representative because they're his bandmates and they were them to Kurt's Kurt. And I'm not a Nirvana, knowledgeable person very much, but like Dave Grohl became, meat and potatoes rock and roll guy, and Chris Novoselic became, whatever it was, like semi-trumper person, or I think he would, like, he got hit when he threw the bass up at the MTV Awards. It hit him on his head a little bit too hard, and
I think he always kind of pushed the envelope to push the envelope. Chris Novoselic, to where this is just the next iteration of that. I feel like
so like deliberately. What was it? It's oppositional nihilism.
Yeah.
Or contrarianism or whatever it is.
Which would be a good album title for if he ever did a solo album, Oppositional Nihilism. But I wonder, like, would Kurt, like, would he be, I don't want to say a fat old musician, but would he be like what all these other people are? Would he have gotten into filmmaking? Would he have, I'm curious what he would have done. Because I'm not the biggest Nirvana fan, but it's just, I can't see that track.
Right.
I think Dave Grohl went so like sideways to where it's like, well, nobody could have predicted that shit.
Right. And would these two guys have done that if they were still, because Nirvana maybe had 3 or 4 albums in them at least after this, right? Yeah. They definitely had if they didn't do Unplugged, they would have done something down tempo or mellow like that, because that was his direction that he wanted to go in.
Yeah.
And
I'm curious if Grohl, if he had stayed alive, would Grohl have released, because all that first Foo Fighters album is all him playing and all demos. So would some of those songs came over to Foo Fighters to where they would have been like, let's say Beatles or Eagles or somebody asked, to where all of a sudden, it may be Kurt, but now let's get a George Harrison song on the album. You know what I mean? Let's work some of Dave's songs into the album.
Were they a band that did that, or was it just all him?
I think the music may have been built by all of them, but I think Kurt drove all the lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
From what I remember, and
I have no recollection of it. See, that's the thing. I at this time, like when that was, because I remember, when this would have been like my freshman year social studies class. We got to watch MTV in class after stuff. This teacher did not give a shit. This was one of those guys who was a PE coach, but also a social studies teacher. He was one of the dumbest teachers I've ever had. And I don't like to say this about teachers because like all my family are teachers, my wife, my brother, my sister-in-law, like everybody. But this guy did not give a shit. And so September 91, like I saw the Smells Like Teen Spirit video, and I thought, I see why people are interested in this. And I was grateful for that phenomenon, for, killing off, at least temporarily, killing off Motley Crue or Warrant or Stryper,
hair metal,
or those kind of, which that's still like those bands aren't dead anymore. They're just like, they're on the country fair circuit now. They are folk music, Jesus. But I wasn't into that stuff the way that my immediate peers were. Like I still liked 80s bands. I was into the Police and U2 and REM and that stuff, and that they were not cool at that point. I mean, among my peers, among 30-something people who were buying tickets to Zoo TV, oh yeah, they were awesome. But it was like me and a smaller clique of friends who were like there was a girl I had a crush on for a while who was like totally into the Breakfast Club. Like she was all about the Breakfast Club in 1992, which was not cool. I mean, if you had a saxophone on something, if you had a keyboard on something, it was fake, man. It was fake. It was selling out. That's what I don't like is the judgmentalism of the whole selling out thing. That never sat right with me at all.
Yeah.
And then once I figured out that that's basically what the Folkies were doing to Dylan, I just like, okay, yeah, this will crop up every generation or so.
Yeah.
And people will get hung up on bullshit.
That's, I got into a pretty heated argument with one of my buddies, and I wonder if it's coming from like what we come from, like design and marketing and stuff. Cause essentially graphic design is selling out for art.
It is.
If you really want to look at it that way, because it's commercial. To where I made a comment, somebody did or lent their song to a commercial for like, let's say Liberty Mutual. Mm-hmm. And my friend was like, God, they sold out. I was like, no, they made so much on that ad that they're going to pump that into their next record that's going to be even weirder and shit.
Yep.
I was like, no, that paid for that. I was like, you go to a job that you don't 100% like to earn money so you can buy video games and shit.
Yeah.
I was like, it's the exact same thing. It's the exact same thing.
This whole, the purity of art and the purity of creation has always been the biggest pile of shit I think we've ever had to endure as creative people. But just because I don't want to starve.
Yeah.
And it's not like, I mean, unless we come back to the old, medieval Renaissance patronage system, which there probably, there are various ways of that still happening. It's not going to be a viable career path. Like I'm not going to be, if I want to be a map illustrator, which is what I want to do, because I don't know GIS software, I'm going to have a hard time of it. So I'm going to have to find something else to do.
Yeah.
So maybe I will take that job in Santa Barbara and commute and hate it. So
I had you saying that about, I was having a discussion the other night with a lot of my friends are artists, and we were talking about artists, and those motherfuckers kept banding about these names. I was like, I've never heard these names. And I've been into this shit since like 7th grade. Like I've been an artist since I was in 7th grade.
Well, I mean, that's just...
And I was like, well, how do you feel? And I rattled off some of my favorite. And they're like, oh, they're okay, but, and I will go, who gives a shit? Stop trying to, one of the guys I looked at him, I said, stop trying to be cool. It doesn't make you cool because you found this Mexican artist from 1782 that no one else knows who that is. Doesn't make you cool. Doesn't make you cool.
That's the white academic talking about jazz phenomenon is what that is. It's like, it's you just drain all the soul out of it and it becomes a museum piece behind glass. That's all they're doing. It's just all these names are just signifiers. It would be the same thing that, if you and I were trying to lorded over somebody who's 25 just by talking about Black Betty, because they don't know who that is, right? Or they don't know the song. And that's all it is. It's just in-group signifiers, and that stuff is really what gets me about the whole selling out art is inside jokes and in-group stuff. And I do have psychological reasons for this that we don't have to get into, but I can't stand in jokes. I can't stand exclusionism or gatekeeping or any of that other stuff. And that's how that manifests in my career is don't do this fucking in joke bullshit with me. I'm not going to have any patience for that at all. Don't be exclusionary. Don't pull up the ladder. Don't try and talk over my head, because I'll be done.
Whereas all of my in jokes with people are so fucking stupid that, like, there's one buddy of mine and I that we listen to this podcast, Never Not Funny, and they have a running joke on that show is anytime the number 69 comes up, the main guy goes, "Up top, my brother," like that, and they give each other high fives, just making fun of it. So every once in a while that'll come up and be like, "Well, how many people do you think we can fit in this room?" And I'll look over my buddy and go, 69. And he looks at me and goes, "My brother."
Well, and everybody has those signifiers.
Yeah.
There was that whole thing that was running around Twitter a couple weeks ago that, like, what was your favorite Homestar Runner thing is, has entered your mental lexicon, for 20 years. And from my brother, was whether or not he talks like strong bad all the time now, and he can just drop it like a hat.
Yeah.
And whereas my boy, I do Homestar Runner, and it was so much fun. But it's less even what the thing was in that context than what it means to you. Like, I will quote, there's funny movie quotes and stuff that my brother and I will do, or my wife will do, that are better than they were in the movie, or at least they're better for us because it's fun for us. It's our thing now. Just even the stupid, like, if I'll pick up stupid Cockney lines or whatever from the Guy Ritchie movies, it's much funner when, like, we'll watch the actual movie and it's not as fun when we do it. And
I'm that way with, there's 3 lines from The Three Amigos, which I think are the funniest things in the world, and no one else finds them as funny as me. And it's the caw, look up here, where he's trying to get them to look at, hey guys, like, that makes me laugh. The plethora would you say we had a plethora of sweaters? What's a plethora? I don't know, Hefe. And then a sweater, like the dumbest things in the world. That I watched that movie. I used to show movies at this venue here in town, and I showed that movie, and no one laughed during those scenes. I was like, fuck. Like, those are my guys.
That's more for you, right? Yeah. That's so.
Just
but
like
that's
with bacon, it's more for me.
More for you. But that's the thing. Like, when people start to use that stuff as some kind of, like, status signifier,
or like snobbery, you're not cool enough to know this.
No, fuck that. And there's that is so rampant in art school for sure. But I was susceptible to it when I was first. It took me about 5 or 6 years to shake off that impulse, because at the first design firm that I worked at, that's where I learned snobbery and paranoia, and at least in the creative sense. And it took a while to shake that off, or it took a while to, to not rant and rave about. And there's still some things that I hate. Like I will always hate papyrus, but there's,
out of all things you could pick, I love that that's the thing. I will always hate.
But because it's not even valuable as kitsch, with, like, we went through that whole thing with the Comic Sans reappraisal a couple years ago, where yes, it's actually, it's worth it it's very, very functional for what was it, for dyslexic people or something.
Yeah,
like
I think so.
Or what was it? Oh, my wife uses it for her 8th graders because it's just an easy tool that they will not gripe about, and they'll not gripe about, I can't read it. And she takes away that particular weapon that they have to disrupt class.
My version was Copperplate Gothic, because when I was in design school, everyone used it. And I was like, please stop using this damn font, man. Copperplate Gothic was I would see go to like Michael's or somewhere and it would be on signage and my buddy would be with me and I would just walk past it and do that.
Yeah. And I would do that with, what would I do that with Mistral for a while.
Mistral.
But that's, so to not totally trash my first design employer.
Yeah.
That's also where I learned this. She had a great explanation for why we're snobby about the things that we're snobby about. And I can't remember if I said this on a previous interview with you, or maybe I said it with Taylor. The things that you have taste about, or the things that you consider bad taste, are the things that are trendy when you first discover what taste is. So for me, that was the like late 80s, early 90s, teal and purple, Mistral, Southwest chic, all this stuff that I just, once I realized that it was a trend, I despised it because I saw through the quote unquote trend. And it took me so long to just get over that shit. But that's why people, that was my first design employer's explanation for why people are snobby about the things that they are snobby about. Is that's what cultivates taste. That's
interesting.
When you first discover what taste is, the things that you're snobby about, or the things that you hate, are the things that are popular when you first discover what taste is.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure that there's some sort of deep psychological explanation for why people do that and why they have those signifier wars, or the exclusionary signifier, whatever.
There was a guy I worked with that he was that way with reverse type. He was like, never use reverse type. It's like, you can't read it. And I was like, if it's Helvetica bold and it's 48 point, you can read it. He was like, no, it's harder to read. And I was like, stop. And he was a marketing guy, not a designer guy. I was like, stop. I'm going to use it even more now just because you told me not.
Yes, exactly. It's the Streisand effect, but with typography, right?
Yeah. I'm just going to be a dick just to you. Anyway. Okay. Now that we've hit hour 4 in Ramblin' Man, we're actually going to get on topic.
Oh, okay.
So, but we're going to go way back. We're going to Casey Kasem this motherfucker. Yeah. So what came, because I know a bit of your story, but people listening may not, what came first for you? When you were young, was maps something you collected, or were you into art, which led to maps? Like where?
It was probably art that led to maps.
Okay.
I started an essay about this and I need to finish it. There was this, by way of digression, there was a great piece that City Lab did at the Atlantic last year sometime, summer 2019. A lady named Laura Bliss did a series called The Maps That Made You. And for her, it was the Thomas Guide from Southern California in the 80s. And that's how she learned about Los Angeles. For me, it was a foam rubber fit estate USA puzzle map by a company called Lori. But so I wanted to talk about that, but I parsed it back a little bit further to get into synesthesia and seeing colors in identifying colors with days of the week or with letters of the alphabet or numbers, and then I thought, oh well, that's probably because I had refrigerator magnets when I was a kid. So like the letter A was red, and so that's how I always that's why I think of the letter A as red. But it was art. It was visual first, visual communication first, colors and shapes, and all that before maps as a way of sort of codifying and making a system out of that, which I didn't know at the time, right? Because I was 5. But I was definitely more of a visual person than a verbal person, which is funny because I have an English degree. But no, because my mother would tell these stories about how like I was the eldest child and I did not really talk at all until I had something to say, or until I could say it properly in English. Whereas my brother would just do baby talk and he'd tell these long rambling stories and just in gibberish, and with the kind of thing where my mom would go, oh really? Oh wow. Oh cool. And like I didn't do that until I could say it properly in English the right way. So I think that might have something to do with that. It's definitely more visual learner, visual thinker.
Yeah. So when you were younger, you were into like art. Did your mom take you all to like art museums, or did you comic books? Like what was your entry into that world?
I'm trying to think about that. I I know that I want to say it was a combination of of books at either at that my parents had or that my grandparents had. My mother's parents valued learning above all else. So I want to say probably the like National Geographics that my mother and grandparents had, and Encyclopedia Britannica, or no, World Book. It was World Book Encyclopedia.
World Book Encyclopedia.
I read the encyclopedia for fun as a kid, and I compared it with, I compared the 1986 version that we had with the 1950 whatever version that my grandfather had, because there were what was it? The countries were different. It wasn't the Soviet countries, but it was it was all the British Empire countries. All the my World Book had all the African countries as independent, and my grandfather's had them all as British or French.
I was going to say, when Jerusalem, like, wasn't that 56, 54 somewhere?
1948 was.
It was 48. Okay, so it was right before. Yeah. Okay.
Pretty sure.
And I thought that was in the 50s. It wasn't.
No, well, and all the African countries were 60 or 61, something like that.
Okay.
Too, or, that era of it. Anyway, but I think that's what it was. It was exposure to that, and there were, my parents did have art. My grandparents had art, but I didn't know. I wasn't thinking about it in terms of appreciation or what does that mean. I want to say it was because of just general knowledge stuff, like encyclopedias, and just if you're curious about the world, which my grandparents and parents did foster that in my siblings and I, just a curiosity about the world. There were these things that you could get started with, like encyclopedias or atlases or National Geographics. That was here's one for geographics. Was that when we were growing up in the 80s, every few years or so, National Geographic would have a piece about astronomy, about the planets, because Voyager was going to all the planets. So like Saturn in 81, Uranus in 87 or 88, Neptune in 89. So they would have these humongous, multi-page spreads of all the different Voyager 2 photos, and they were just phenomenal. It blew my mind. And so I would go to things. I would have interests that I would be really intensely interested in. Like I would just suck them dry and then stop, go to something else. Like I was really into whales, or really into astronomy, or really into dinosaurs. And when I was 6, I wanted to be a paleontologist. Really intensely. Like I wrote to Stephen Jay Gould, and he wrote back to me. And somewhere that letter exists. I don't know. My mom has it.
He was like, here's where I'm going to be an idiot. He was like, wait, somebody knows who I am.
Well, no, like he was kidding. Really cool. He was courteous to a small child in a way that you think a celebrity would not be.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what the initial inspiration was, but I want to say, to answer your question, I want to say that I was just a visual learner and a visual thinker more than verbal.
And it sounds like, you were going from thing to thing to thing to like consume like data.
Yes.
But maybe one of the ways you consume that data was repetitively seeing the art, like photography of the missions, or, here's the migration pattern of
Tyrannosaurus Rex in North America, 65 million years
ago. I kept saying, won't say Brontosaurus, but isn't it no longer?
No, they brought it back. You can refer to them both as, I don't remember what the story was, and this is old news now, apparently. Some child told me this. Like for us when we were kids, the biggest thing about dinosaurs was they had feathers or they're warm-blooded. And now it's like, no, I mean, that's passe stuff. I mean, they did have feathers for sure, but it's like, no, they're onto other new weird things that they do. Like, I don't even know anymore. I should catch up with that.
But that was the vehicle to get that. That was what helped speed the plow and get you to learn almost quicker.
Because I wasn't getting this stuff in school. For sure.
Because I always think about this. What was it? There was something I was working, one job that I was working that it was the manuals at the pet company that we could not write the manuals at higher than a 5th grade level to make them comprehensible to
Accessible.
anybody.
Yeah.
Accessible.
Yeah.
So, but I wonder if somebody went back with a fine-tooth comb and looked at that encyclopedia from 1951, I wonder what the comprehension level was for it.
My guess is it would be high.
Yeah.
Not that stuff has been dumbed down for stupidity levels, but just that audience at that time for that work was probably, and we're saying this in our 2020 white man hindsight here, but that 1951 World Book Encyclopedia was probably written for a certain audience of a certain race and income level.
Yeah.
And so that's why not, and presumed, whoever was creating that presumed that this certain race and or income level would have this level of education. Whereas, of course, not everybody would, and other people outside of those particular levels would have comparable intelligence, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think that might have been something that might have been part of it too.
Because I say that kind of remembering, I think my grandparents had a set of like mini encyclopedias directly for kids, to where they were like the taller books.
Yeah.
And they had a set of those. God knows, my grandfather, he was, when he retired from the railroad, he managed an apartment complex or a few apartment complexes because he knew how to do everything like plumbing, electrical, all that shit. But I'm sure they were left in an apartment that he just brought them home. I guarantee you.
Oh, yeah.
I think they were from like the 60s or the 70s, like way before any grandkids were in the picture. But to that point, talking about my grandfather, it's like, fuck, I don't even know if he graduated high school, but like he knew more about plumbing, electrical, how to build a house than probably 99% of the world right now. Like, and how funny that is. The encyclopedias were written at a higher language level. You had people like that. Like there's a guy I know that's a nuclear physicist out in Oak Ridge, or nuclear engineer. That I think he may have a bachelor's, but it was back when they ran quarters in like the 60s or 70s. And now any kid coming in there has to have at least like a PhD to do that job. And yet that guy could essentially run that entire nuclear plant by himself. Yeah.
Well, that speaks to, that's something that it's been just a core tenet of my family's belief system, because they're all educators, but that there are different kinds of intelligence and different ways to teach to different kinds of intelligence. My dad's story about that was when he was a history teacher. My dad was a history teacher and then a counselor and then a principal. But when he was a teacher at a continuation high school, he had a kid who could take apart and reassemble a motorcycle in like 2 or 3 hours, or just whatever that a fast amount of time would be. And the kid was a genius for that, for just intuitively understanding what the parts were and how they worked. But he just didn't like school. He didn't like history class, and he wasn't interested in learning, what happened in 17 blah, 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 so then you find a way to figure out how to teach to that kid so they can pass the test and at least nominally have this piece of paper that'll keep the bullshit away from, because that's what the diploma is, or that's what the BA is too. It's just like, it's just this level of don't bother me with your bullshit.
That's one frustration point with me at this point, because I've been doing graphic design for 28 years. And this was like 2 years ago. A buddy of mine, there's a university here, and he was like, hey, man, they're looking for an adjunct professor. You might want to apply. And I was like, oh, that's something I would love to do later on in life, or I'd love to do it now, is teach design at a higher level. I don't want to teach it at a high school level, because I know there are kids who in that vein are like, I'm just in here to get a C. Like, I don't give a shit, about any of this. I want to where people are actually. And so I started talking to that guy. I was like, I think we might have one problem. He was like, what's that? And I was like, dude, I have an associate's. And he was like, oh no, you can't even apply. And he was like, you have to have a master's. I was like, here's
And
the
they don't even bring in like commensurate professional experience, or they don't.
No.
Oh.
On a university level or on a college level, I don't even think I could teach at the college that I graduated from.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I there's one point where it's like, you're talking about like the bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, how is there not a math equation to like, you've been doing this 10 years, that equals a bachelor's. You've been doing this 20 years, that equals a master's. You know, at a certain point, it's like, man, you're just shooting yourself in the foot because you're going to get a 26-year-old who's never done this in a professional environment teaching those kids all because he got the piece of paper.
Right.
It's like that absolutely drives me nuts. So
yeah, that's. I remember in a previous conversation that we had, you and I were talking about kind of preparing a graduate or a recent graduate for this or that reality of, or like using their portfolio as an equivalent. Like, you know, when people don't pay attention, people don't look at your portfolios, but it gets you in the door.
Yeah.
And it shows people how you will present and defend your work or whatever, or your thought processes or your decisions, like why you made this decision. And that I think it also comes down to the level of, I don't know how I'm going to draw this in here, because the other thing that my family noticed, my family of teachers, is that they all have a certain level that they're tolerant for. My brother's a high school teacher. He would not in his life teach 8th grade. My wife is an 8th grade teacher. She would never teach elementary school. Oh no, you can't. They don't write their name on their paper. Forget that. Whereas, like, I wouldn't have patience for either of those things. But and I learned this through AIGA though, and doing all these different portfolio days. That my wheelhouse is new grads or recent grads who are terrified, who don't know what they want to do for their career. And that was me for sure. I didn't become a designer until at least 4 years after I got a degree and in a different subject.
Yeah.
So that, speaking to the idea of, you know, people learn in different ways, people are on, nobody, this arbitrary schedule of time that we put people on, to know this and that thing by this or that time, or, you know, or even in the United States where we throw people out of the house at 18 and say, good luck, you know, we're not going to care about you anymore. I can't remember what got me on the subject, but this is Rambling Man, right? So that's okay.
Oh no, that's okay. So your family, you came from educators.
Yes.
So in that, did you feel like a pressure growing up that it's like, I've always got to maintain good grades and stuff? Or were they like forgiving and being like, okay, he's not doing great in chemistry?
No, actually, that's a good example too, because I got my first F in chemistry.
Oh, wow.
But my parents did not blame it on me, and my mom did. They were divorced at that point. But no, they were never. I never got pressure. I was a gifted child, right? I was sent into that particular track in I think in 3rd or 4th grade, and that was annoying. But no, I never got pressure from my parents to do better they were just happy with what I was doing, because I liked going to school. My friends were there. And, you know, I liked, for the most part, I was really lucky. I had good teachers and I liked my teachers. And for a lot of them, my mom knew them personally because, after I was in 4th grade, she went back to work as a teacher's aide, as a bilingual aide. And she was at the elementary school. So she was there, like I was in 4th grade, my brother was in 2nd, and my sister was in kindergarten. So she went back to school. She went back to work and worked at the elementary school where we were at. So we knew these people, and they were good friends of my mother's. And so it was never, I think the only thing my mom ever pressured me to do was to take AP Spanish.
Okay.
Because that was what she was here's like the way that my mom's thought process worked. Like she never pressured me to do anything. Her parents, I don't even know. I won't get into that dynamic. That's something that she should probably talk about. But my mom went to UCI in the early 70s when there were still cows in the fields there. And she was the only white lady in her advanced Spanish and Portuguese class. And so like the way that she went to college was she just took everything that she wanted to take.
Mhm.
And, you know, by the time she was, you know, halfway through her junior year, I think it was, she said, oh, I have all these, you know, Spanish language and literature. I guess that's what I'm going to major in. And so she could speak it fluently for a long time. I think she likes to get practice in it. Where my mom and stepfather are in Half Moon Bay these days, and there is a fairly large brown population there. So my mom gets to speak Spanish a lot.
Is that still in Southern California?
No, Half Moon Bay is just south of
Bay.
Yeah,
okay.
just south of San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, my stepdad works at Dropbox. Did I tell you that?
No.
Yeah,
oh, man.
He's 71 and 70.
Maybe you did tell me. No, you did tell me that. Yeah. Because the age thing came up. You were like, he still works at Dropbox.
Yeah. Well, and that was a cool story. I think I went into this too, but to make it really, really quick. But my stepfather is a computer programmer, and he has been since the 70s. He's one of my other male role models, few male role models. He is he's a programmer. He got his dream job at age 60 when he became the network manager for at Stanford for the professors. And then for whatever reason, that job didn't work out, but he was working with a bunch of really young kids there, and they all decamped to Dropbox, and they told the people working there, hey, you should hire this guy. He was like Gandalf to them. And so then he's been working at Dropbox ever since. And so, that's so my mom actually didn't have to work anymore once they got remarried. But so mom, the only thing that she pressured me to do, or that I felt pressured to do, was to take AP Spanish. And that was the lowest AP score that I got out of all of, like, I killed it in English and history and shit, but Spanish, it was hard. But it was good. That was like, I had one of those kinds of Spanish teachers who, I think my sister-in-law is a little bit like this. My sister-in-law, Carla, is from Mexico. But who's my high school Spanish teacher for AP was Cristina Leon. And I think my aunt knew her from high school, and she was a hard ass, but she was really cool to everybody who worked hard and kicked ass. And I got by with a lot in that class anyway, just because I could pronounce things correctly. I didn't have the gringo accent. I could just sit there, and the ear for music is also an ear for language.
Okay.
My mother had the ear for language more and music because she played piano. My brother has the ear for music, obviously, because he was in band with me, but he also has the ear for language. He is a fluent Spanish speaker now, my brother. And that's just from living with his wife for a long time. And he could, like, Bryn can teach, I think he does too. He teaches the ESL history in Spanish at his school. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. But Bryn's thing is classic. Like, he was a classicist as a kid. In college, I should say. He was into Greek and Latin, and he took that stuff. And so he took a trip abroad to Italy and Greece and had the time of his life.
Wow. Whereas I took 2 years. I was in talented and gifted.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, I got to take a computer class in 6th grade,
mm-hmm.
and then Spanish in 7th and 8th.
Mm-hmm.
Only thing I got out of Spanish was I know how to roll my R's. Because my teacher,
and that's a thing.
My teacher, Mr. Lomax, taught me ruffles have ridges. That's the only thing I can do. Like, it was literally, we were the last, both in 7th and 8th grade, we were the last class of the day, and he would just have us clean up the room.
Yeah.
And once we got done cleaning up the room, we could do whatever. We could play cards. We could do whatever. To where he had a heart attack in 8th grade when I was in 8th grade. Yeah. And, he was older. He was in his 60s or something, but they brought in another teacher, and there was only like 8 or 9 of us in this class.
Mm-hmm.
And she started like, okay, so open your books and we were like, ooh, what? and she was like, yeah, how far are you into the book? I was like, we never cracked the book open last year. I don't know.
Oh, man.
She was pissed. Like, I think she taught us for like 6 weeks or so.
Mm-hmm.
Till he was able to come back, and she was just angry at us the entire time. I was like, now I look back and I was like, you're an adult. We're all kids. It's not our fault that the teacher didn't teach us.
Yeah.
Mr. Lomax didn't give a shit.
Yeah.
But when I went to high school, they were like, well, you could take Spanish 3 if you want. Or we'll just count those to your high school. Just count those to my high school.
Yeah,
just count them.
Yeah.
Just count them.
No, I didn't get to do that. I had to take AP Spanish. But that was the only thing that my mom pressured me to do.
Yeah.
Education wise, they never. I mean, if we did have bad grades at some point, they would have tried to help us. But then here's another one. Like my brother was a phenomenal test taker. So he deliberately slacked off when he was a junior and senior, and he got like C's. But he had like I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was a killer SAT score. And so my mom was so frustrated with him.
Wow.
But he got his act together, and he graduated. But it was the kind of thing where like he could skate on stuff like that. I did that for a while until I couldn't. Like I never learned how to study properly. School is just easy. Just because it was when it was things that I was interested in, it was super easy. But for math stuff or for algebra was hard. Stuff I had to study for, I would fail, especially in college. When college, because you can take whatever you want to for most part. But the stuff that I had to take that I wasn't really good at or that I had to study for, I would fail because I never learned how to study properly. So there was that sort of like, I was enthusiastic about the things, or I was good at the things I was enthusiastic about, but I never learned how to study properly.
In that vein, I would get frustrated because when I was in high school, I was kind of taking care of my little sister, and she's 11 and a half years younger than me. So I was kind of taking care of her as a kid myself, playing football, basketball, and baseball, and also working at the ballparks, scorekeeping, baseball and basketball. So when it came to like homework and shit, algebra was easy to me because it just this plus this equals this, But I would always get frustrated because it would be like, here's 50 questions for you to do. And I would literally do like 15 and I would hand it in and he'd be like, you didn't do them all. It's like, I got all 15 of those right. I know what I'm doing. Stop making me do 35 more.
Oh my, that's exactly what happened to me in 7th grade. We had to take a placement test to take 8th grade algebra. And so like there were 40 questions. And I did 19 of them, or no, I finished maybe half of them and I got 19 out of 20. Of the ones that I did about 20 and I got 19 of them right, but there were 40 questions. So I failed it. I didn't get to go into algebra with the rest of my friends. And this was the other shitty teacher I had. Of like maybe all the teachers I had, there were maybe 2 of them that were bad, 3. And this guy just wouldn't pass me. He wouldn't send me to the thing. And it was all men too. All of my shitty teachers were men.
Yeah. I'm thinking back. I take that. I had one bad English teacher who was a female, which was funny because I failed her class my junior year, but passed her class my sophomore year. I had her the same teacher 2 years in a row.
Yeah, I did. Times, yeah.
My math, here's a fun fact about that algebra teacher who ended up being my geometry teacher, Mr. Baldwin. So Mr. Baldwin was a 6'3", 6'4", jacked dude who was probably 50. He played linebacker for the Bears. And he was Martin Luther King Jr.'s bodyguard.
Hey.
And so, but he hated freshmen to where the rumor, of course it's a rumor, was that there was those emergency doors, like where the windows were, there was always one that was red that was in case of fire, break this open. That he held a freshman by his ankles from the 4th floor. And he, at one point, because he knew I played football, he liked to pick on me a lot. One time I fell asleep in class and had my mouth open. He threw a piece of chalk into my mouth because I dared fall. And the other thing was, he was like, if you do 100 push-ups, I'll give you a B in my class and you never have to do any homework. And I was able to do like 40. And he was like, damn it, every football player should be able to do 100 push-ups. I'm like, I'm tall. Like, it's hard as shit for me to do a push-up. What are you talking about? I was like, I'm used to picking up 300-pound guys. I'm used to pushing guys, like that. I was like, doing a push. What the hell are you talking? Like, and one of my...
That reminds me of, like, that reminds me of my when you're done.
Yeah, one of my buddies in that class was just yelling at me then, come on, damn it. He was like, I can't believe you can't do this, man. If I could do this, I would get a B. And I was like, shut up, you're in the band, fuck you. Like, died out at like 40 something.
Oh man, it's that one. My wife does this to her 8th graders all the time. She's like, "Oh yeah, I didn't like you when you were in 7th grade. You didn't? No, but I love you now. I hate 7th graders." When I was in my regular Spanish teacher before I was in AP, I had 2 years with a guy named Stephen Billy, who was one of my awesomest teachers in the world. He's about 5'3", jacked for 5'3" guy.
Nice.
Little Puerto Rican guy from New York, with crew cut, severe mustache, football coach. And he would do this. He'd do the push-up thing too, but he would do that if you were, he'd do it as punishment, and he wouldn't make, and if girls wanted to do it, he would let them do it, but he wasn't sexist about it. He's like, okay, well, if you can't do that, that's okay. But for the women who are athletes, he's like, oh yeah, you're going to do it. And so people would gripe about him and gripe about doing push-ups and and they'd have arm wrestling contests against Mr. and Billy. And some kids would, especially the football players, would gripe about it. And whenever they would, he would flex in like his tiny little, 5'4" man frame, but he would flex and he'd be like, put your leg up against that and we'll see how many push-ups you really get to do or not. Or no, I love that guy. I was Doobie. That was where I learned what Doobie was, because he had nicknames for everybody and he loved puns. So like and he had like the whole back of the room was full of puns. So for the phrase "Eso sí que es," it would be a picture of socks, or for the number cinco, it would be a picture of the Titanic. And because that would help kids learn the language. And so he had nicknames for everybody. I was Doobie when my brother was in the class. He was Doobie the second. When my sister was in the class, she was Doobie the third, but I was the original Doobie at that point. Anyway, so this is to counterbalance the thing of where, all my bad teachers were men. That's not true. I had some really good male teachers.
One of my science teacher, my freshman year, I just looked him up on Facebook because I would love to find him to thank him, because he was a bigger dude too, but he could also sing opera. And he was like, no, I grew up playing football. And then I got into classical music and opera and all this stuff. And he was like, he said to me when I was like 13, he was like, just because you're a big dude and you play sports doesn't mean you have to be dumb. Mm-hmm. Like he really pushed me really hard to be like, I still remember like one of my first CDs was Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, because it had the Bryan Adams song, but I loved the score to that. Mm-hmm. So there was one point where we were talking about something, Mr. Bailey and I were talking about something, and I said that I owned that. And he was like, oh, can I borrow that? And I was like, sure. So and then like 2 days later, he brought it back. He was like, thank you. He was like, my wife and I sat down after dinner and we sat and listened to that album.
I was like, all right.
And he was like, no, we just listened to it. Here's some opera CDs for you. Like he was just he was like, yes, you can do that. You don't have to just listen to Pearl Jam or Prince or Dr. Dre or whatever. You can listen to a classical album in that way you consume rap music.
Yes. Yeah. Like you could, and that was a big thing for me in English class was interpreting literature. That's when the light bulb went off in my head. And Linda Jürgen was her name. And nice. She said, if you can think about a piece of art in one genre, if you can analyze a piece of art in one genre, you can do it for anything else. So I'm going to teach you to think about literature this way, but you can apply it to thinking about film or about fine art or about music. Just as long as you think about it deeply instead of just consuming it. I mean, there's a time and place for that. If you just want to sit back and do that. But if you do want to think deeper about creative work, this is how you do that for literature. And you'll find a way to do that for other forms of art. And that was huge for me as far as, learning critical and interpretive theory and how to do that.
So when you move on to design later on, is that nugget already sitting in the back of your brain?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because I was an English I had an English degree. And so I could already communicate creatively or communicate about creative work in one way. So I was already confident enough to present and defend my work as far as portfolios. And once at least in portfolios thing too, once I realized that portfolio sequencing was just like the way that, that bands would sequence their albums.
Yep.
You start strong, you end strong.
And
you tell a story in between.
And you put one good song in the middle to keep them interested.
You start off, you put your first single as number 7 if you have 12. You put your first single on the beginning of side B, just like the Police did with Synchronicity, just like U2 did with Octung Baby. You don't front load it, or you don't do a whole side of rockers and a whole side of ballads like Pearl Jam did, which, more power to them. It worked for them. But I
was going to say Pink Floyd's The Wall, because I think it's record 3 side A, or record 2 side A is Hey You, or maybe it ends on Hey You.
Well, but think Dark Side of the Moon has Time is number 3 and Money is number 7. I think Money starts side 2.
I think so.
Something like that.
I'm going to have to look this up, because this is going to drive me absolutely bonkers. Oh, I don't want the movie. Just let's see. And I swear we are going to talk about maps.
Okay.
Side 3 starts Hey You and ends with Comfortably Numb. Because I remember when I was in college is when I really started deep diving on Pink Floyd that wasn't just what you heard on the radio. And once I got to The Wall, because my dad was a Pink Floyd fan, he had a shit ton of their albums. I was like, fuck, man, side 3 of The Wall may be one of the greatest sequences, pieces of music ever. Like, it's just rat-a-tat-tat, one after the other. All of them sync up together. And to start with Hey You and end with Comfortably Numb is nuts. Like, it is absolutely crazy. So you're going to get the degree in English, but at any point when you were young or throughout this time, are you creating any art? Are you painting? Are you drawing? Are you natural? Does that come naturally to you?
Yes, it did. And I would create art, and I would draw. I made a map of Australia when I was in 3rd grade, like with clay and paint. And what I would remember, like I said, it would be the shapes. I made a map of South America, of the South American countries, when I was like 6. But I would do all kinds of art, to the point where my mother thought I should go to art school instead. Like, she wanted me to go to Laguna College of Art and Design, which was right next door to where I grew up in South Orange County. But I wanted to go away for school. So I went far enough away. I went 3 counties away.
I like that. That's just far enough away. That's just far enough.
Like on the other side of Los Angeles, right?
But a friend of mine, they used to live behind me. He was from New York, but his family lived in Jersey. And his family, his dad, his stepmom, and their 3 daughters. So his stepsisters, they moved down here, and he was like, they were looking around our neighborhood, and he was like, let's go. This is a better neighborhood, and it's this other town, one town over, called Powell, that he was like, or actually it's 2 towns over. And he was just like, oh, they have better schools out there. We think you'll fit in more, all this. And he was like, no, they just need to be at least 25 minutes away from me. It's like, I got to get them the hell. And it was funny because the youngest daughter was really into like interpretive dance. And she was like, there's no schools devoted to interpretive dance down here. Like, what the fuck are you talking? No, you take a class. What are you talking about? You're coming from New York. Shit. Yeah. Screw that, man. That's not how we roll down here. But so your mom wanted to pushing you in that direction.
Yeah. And so I guess I lied when I said the only thing she pushed me to do was take AP Spanish. But what helped her cave on that one was, she grew up in the same area in South Orange County, and she went to UC Irvine, which is 20 minutes away. And so like for her in 1970, that wasn't far away enough from her parents.
Yeah.
But then also like she was really close with her younger sister, the way that I was with my younger brother. So that was good for them, as siblings and friends. I would bounce around this, going back to what you asked about art. I would do it outside. I wasn't ever formally trained in art. I think I had one art class in 8th grade and another one in for a semester as a senior in high school, but I never had proper art training. And so that's what I was intimidated about as far as going to art school. Is like, I didn't know, we had little Meet the Masters programs in elementary school where you'd learn about, you learn about Toulouse-Lautrec for like an hour, but I didn't know about fine art that way. I wasn't exposed to, which I think might have been beneficial. I wasn't exposed to the capital C canon. I wasn't told that this is the way things are, and these are other than, Meet the Masters. But even that was just like, here's a guy named Toulouse-Lautrec. Nothing was canonized for me. I was exposed to the idea of professional creativity because my mother's sister was a screenwriter. She still is. She's a playwright in Santa Fe. But for a good chunk of time in the 80s, my aunt was a screenwriter in Hollywood. And her husband, my uncle, who's the guy who got me, my brother and I, the tape recorder. My uncle is a psychiatrist. He was a psychiatrist in West LA. So their joke was always that she would work with all these crazy people and then he would treat them. But she basically wrote chick flicks before chick flicks were a thing. Oh. And so she had to deal with all the old school Hollywood sexism and bullshit about that. And so she'd had her work appropriated or stolen, so I learned all about the ups and downs of actually dealing with professional creativity and trying to do it in one industry, and watching her be incredibly frustrated about it to the point. But I also saw her decide, okay, well, this aspect of it is not for me. And so then when they moved to Santa Fe and she found a like-minded group of creative people there, and she joined a theater venue or something and she became a screenwriter, and she joined what was it? It was not like a troupe or anything like that, but it was just like a collective of playwrights, and they had a venue to do their thing, and she wrote a bunch of stuff, and it was amazing. It's like, still, I want to go back and interview her about her career. I should probably do that. Yeah. Somebody did it with her a few years back on YouTube, so I should probably do it again. Yeah, my aunt is about, I think she's 68. I don't think she's 70 yet.
You'd be the guest host of Ramblin' Man.
Yeah. Yeah. So my aunt was a good example of how to be a professional creative person. Yeah. That I didn't realize at the time, all the detail. I just knew about her life experiences and the things that she and my mom would talk about.
Do you think because they came from education, you kind of had your head down to just kind of get through, be like, here's what I want to do. Here's what it's going to take. I got to get there. Or maybe that could just be a youth thing too.
It was a youth thing. It was like, it was one of those things where, my mother didn't get to be whatever she wanted to be. Nobody told her you can be whatever you want to be, right? Because she was a boomer growing up in the 50s and 60s, a woman. So when she told that to us, it was almost intimidating. Like, oh, I don't know yet. Well, you can be whatever. Well, I don't know. I mean, do I have to learn now? Do I have to decide now? Well, no, I didn't. Like when I went to college, my mom said, well, I didn't know what my major was until I was almost finished. Yeah. And like, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up for a long time.
I still don't.
No, you mean the only thing that I wanted, I've gotten to the point where I know what I want to be. I want to be a creative person. I want to be able to, to express myself creatively and maybe get paid for it. That would be nice. But
we're in the same vein. There was a buddy of mine that we were sitting at his house, and he said, if money was no object, if you could do whatever you want. I was like, I'm on a bar because I can't go a full podcast without mentioning Kevin Smith. I would want to chase whimsy for a living. Like if I want to go out and shoot a video with the local contemporary dance troupe, that, we block it and we work everything out and just release that. If I want to record a podcast, if I want to, curate a play, anything creative, that's what I would do with my life. If money were no object, it would be creating a shit ton of content that did not have monetary value to it. if that makes sense.
If it was just something that people could experience and have it be like, just experience beautiful creativity.
Yes, because I feel like I have a weird, and I'm sure everybody has this, but I have a weird skewed view of the world that it's, go back to Kevin Smith. He was like, I made the film Tusk because I knew no one else would make that film and I wanted to see it. And I kind of feel the same way of like, I've got a box over here full of ideas. And I was like, if I sat down, if it was like, money were no object. And there were things like I've drawn up plans for a coffee table. If I could just write up those plans, hand them to a woodworker to build it, not even have to build it myself, I couldn't accomplish everything in that box in a year. There's no way. There's no way. So I don't know what that is. Like, is that Casey Neistat? Is that, what is, I don't know what that is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I understand, I think.
Yeah. It's and for me, it's always something too, where I think this is that old intensity issue coming up, where like, if I work on something, like say if you're working on a couple different projects, if you burn out on one of them, there's something else that you can jump to that'll be invigorating until that burns you out, and then maybe you can go back to the other one, and you've thought of things that you can work on for it. Yeah. I do that with, like, if I would record music for a while, and I would just, after a while you bump your head against the wall, and so I thought, okay, well, I'll go move on. I'll have some fun with maps. Right. And so what that creates is a really fertile sort of cross-pollination of inspiration, where I'll bring in, like, what happens if I put baseball and maps together? Oh, somebody already did it. I'll send you this, something called Flip Flop Fly Ball. It was one of the first, it sounds like a Kickstarter-y kind of project, but it was a British guy who fell in love with baseball. And he was a designer, and so he created a whole bunch of different things, like all typical from like 10 years ago now. But I mean, you'll see it everywhere in infographics now, where here are the 450,000 home runs hit from Yankee Stadium, and this is all the these were their line. This one went to left field, this one went to
I forgot.
It would be like for some, like Babe Ruth. These are Babe Ruth's 755 home runs, or Hank Aaron's 755 home runs. Babe Ruth had 715. So
right? You'll love this. When I ended up going to community college for 3 years, I took an extra year so I could take some extra classes. And one of some of the classes I took, and this would have been 1997, 1998, 1999, were I wanted to take psychology, sociology, sociological problems and change, and what is it called? It was advanced something and statistics. I was like, I feel probability and statistics. Yeah. And I was like, I feel like that class would be beneficial, because then I could do market research and explain why the design I came up with works. Like at a time where that wasn't a huge thing. And now everything is analytics.
Is everything. Yeah. I should have done that. Like, I was in PSTAT 5A when I was a geography major for a couple of years. Because did I tell you that? Like, I was a geography major for a couple of years. No. And I that's what I went in as to UCSB. But UCSB's geography department, as awesome as it is not what I was It was like, I was very much into the social, cultural, historical geography sorts of things, the way people are in the world, the history of whatever. Berkeley does that. I didn't get into Berkeley. I didn't even bother applying. UCSB's is much more environmental science and practical use of geographic information systems and whatnot. And so all that was really cool. I just wasn't any good at it. Right. It wasn't, and so things came to a head where one of my favorite classes that I took there was urban geography. All kinds of stuff, whether it's the movement of people and versus urban microclimates, like the way that cities are heat islands and stuff like that. But the sections for that, I was in, it was urban planning. I took urban planning, and because I thought maybe I wanted to do that, and I worked my ass off and I got a D. So I thought, all right, well, maybe this isn't for me. What else do I know how to do? I can write. So let's go do English stuff. Anyway, but yeah. So,
but you had that, but you still had that kernel in the back of your head of like geography aspect of it all.
Oh yeah.
And
Because
impact. Yeah.
in impact, just because it is in, like, for me as in a self-serving way, because I am a very self-centered person. It's another venue of orienting yourself in the world, describing learning about your place in the world, describing what you want to do, describing where you want to go in the world, describing how you want to affect the world. Maps are a way to do all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Very, very much a storytelling thing. I know storytelling has been a hated buzzword for like at least a decade. But that's what those things do. They're tools.
Yeah.
Maps are tools.
So you get your degree in English. At any point, because I always think of like collections, because I showed you like the map that I got on one of the other things we recorded. Was there ever a point where you started like hoarding or collecting maps that you found them?
Yes. But it was very specific, and I still have some of them. It was, like I mentioned it before, the Thomas Guide.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thomas Guide were they started in California. They were based in Orange County. And for a while I wanted to try and intern there, but I didn't. Back in late 90s, I think they were bought by Rand McNally. But before that, for at least 2 or 3 decades before that, maybe 4, they made street guides and directories for Southern California and then Northern California. And then they would do different metro areas around the country, like Phoenix and DC and whatever. And that was how I learned about local Southern California geography, was through the Thomas Guides. And I would collect them from different years, always from Orange County, because that's where I grew up. And that's how I would still, speaking of synesthesia, still picture cities in my mind. Anaheim is always orange because that's what it was in the Thomas Guide. Laguna Beach is always pink. Huntington is pink. Garden Grove is purple. And the other thing about the Thomas Guides too, and this is sort of like a kind of weirdly pathetic story from my childhood, is like one of the reasons that my parents separated was because of my father's commute. Like when he first became a principal, it was in a place called Glendora, which is in the East San Gabriel Valley in eastern Los Angeles County.
Okay.
It'd be from South OC. It was at least an hour drive one way, and it was always terrible traffic in the late 80s. And so one of the things that I thought I could do to help my parents' marriage was to find alternate ways for my dad to commute to his job. And so I did that, like off the freeway. I found surface streets for him to go to, like, well, you could go on Coast Highway up here to Beach Boulevard, and then not knowing, because I hadn't been there, not knowing that, the stoplights would hinder his progress just as much. And, and my parents their marriage had all other kinds of issues too. But I thought that, my 10-year-old brain, this is how I could help solve it. So I used the Thomas Guides for that. Maybe a little bit after that, I used the San Francisco Thomas Guide to help my mom through rush hour traffic in the city on her first road trip as a single parent. Like we drove up to far Northern California, to the Eureka area, and from California is a big state. I know you haven't been here, but if you
I've been there.
You have? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I've been to San Francisco a few times. I think like 4 times. And I've been to Southern California. That was like one 10-day trip that we were doing.
It was the baseball stadiums you haven't been to.
It's a baseball state. Well, I've been to the ones in Oakland and San Francisco, not the Southern. I was telling my mom this the other day, maybe you'll like this, because it is kind of in this line. No smartphone, but GPSs were a thing. And we were doing a photo shoot out in Orange County. And after it, my boss and coworker, they were flying back. I was staying in Southern California for 4 more days, I think. And I had to, we were staying in Orange County. We had to drive up to, is it Long Beach Airport? I think that was it. Long Beach Airport, to pick up the rental car. And then I drove from there to the hotel I was staying at in Burbank. And because I was using this shitty little GPS that my dad had, that I think he was a truck driver. I think they had upgraded him, but they let him keep the old one that was like way the fuck out of date.
That's what you were using.
That's what I was using from this shitty little Corolla. And the hotel. I'm trying to think how I can do this. The hotel. Okay, so this is going to be great for listeners. So the mic is the road.
Yes.
The hotel was off the road, but there was shit in between, and there was no turnoff. And it literally, the GPS kept taking me down an alleyway around a business that there was no entrance there to the hotel. It was a separate street. Like you had to drive up like 2 miles to get to the street that went back 2 miles to the hotel. So I kept driving in a circle, and I finally flip phoned it. And luckily I had printed out MapQuest or something.
Yeah.
Or no, the check-in information. And I called him and I was like, dude, how the fuck? The other problem I had was I had gotten off an exit because I saw the name of the road that it was on.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned out that was in Echo Park.
Mm-hmm.
And the road just T-head and ended. And then it picked up 6 miles up the road.
Yes.
And I was like, what the hell kind of bullshit is it?
It was made after the Northwest Territories Act. There's can't be square.
And then got on the phone, and the guy had to direct me into the hotel. And then the 4 days I was there, I had to have him do that every fucking night because I just couldn't figure it out. Like it just made so the Thomas guide I understand because I was like, none of this makes sense. Like none of this makes sense.
So and then the Thomas guide helped me realize what the hi. Want to come say hi?
Sure.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Although she probably can't hear me because of headphones.
My whole room, like how cool this room is.
I was trying to guess the artists.
The artist. Oh, well, those are all Avett Brothers posters.
Yeah.
That she would get from the different shows that she's been to. That one's Santa Barbara. That one is.
I have lots of posters.
Yeah.
So, fun fact,
I should hang out a bit more often.
You should.
my friend Justin, who he goes by the name Status Serigraph, one of the first bands that he did posters for was Avett Brothers. He would charge him $75 and do a poster for him. Nice. And that was his earliest client. Was them when they were
and he's in Knoxville.
In Knoxville, yeah.
Okay, so they'd just be over the hill, right?
Yeah, and that's when they were playing shitty little bars and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was nuts. Anyway, Thomas Guide. I totally understand that about because it also taught you. Like
it taught me what the streets were, especially to the degree, at least in Dana Point, where I grew up, where I could freehand draw the city of Dana Point and its streets.
Wow.
Which was also a thing for me to go explore. This was early Cure by Bike days, because I'm a cyclist, but I would also ride my bike around Dana Point when I was 11, 12, in the way that kids, apparently don't do now, but that we could, right?
Yeah.
For me, it was difficult because my house was on a hill, so every way I would have to come home would be going up a hill. But I got to have, it was early, Google Street View or something like that, where I would literally just go, what does that street look like? I'm going to go over there. So
you got you were into those. So they were always kind of in the back of your mind.
Always in the background in some form. Yeah.
So then we were talking about collecting. So you collected Thomas Guides. Like, how is it there? Are there a bunch of old like flea markets or anything where you could find like old school maps and shit?
For old school maps, well, at a certain point, they become really expensive, like old school, 1600s, 1700s maps, to the point where, that like university libraries acquire them. And that was, UCSB did have, I forget what it was called, but there was a special section of the UCSB library that was all about maps. And so I would go look up, 1952 Thomas Guides in there or something, but they would also have like, older European maps, not necessarily Age of Discovery type things, but, if you wanted to go find a Civil War map, it might be in there.
Wow.
That's a little bit from my mother as well. What her student job at UCI was in the rare books department of the UCI library. So she, literally, handling history and being very careful with it because it could fall apart in your hand.
Yeah.
So there were, maybe, for 20th century maps, like USGS or those kind of quad maps or National Geographics. Those are still kind of fairly easy to come by. For the older shit, like, you know, the one back in, you know, 17 whatever or 1600, when the Dutch and the Portuguese would treat maps like they were nuclear secrets. Those are hard to come by. There was a job I did at my first design firm when I worked at first design firm. I don't know if she's still alive. I should go. The reason I haven't contacted her is because I just didn't like that job very much. But there's a lady in Santa Paula just up the road here who has a collection. And it was originally a map collection that she'd shared with her husband. And this was something that I'd tried and failed to do a website for. And that way that, you know, Google Maps does it real easy now, where you can just zoom in and move around. I couldn't do that in 2006. It was really hard. And so that's...
No, because back then they were really pushing Google Earth.
Yes, I remember that, which was awesome at the time. I love Google Earth.
But for that, it did not work very well.
No. So, I mean, the thing about being a map geek is that there are so many of us. Like, you can specialize in what kind of a niche map thing you want to do. Like, you know, you can be a Marvel fan, but I'm going to say this, or you can be a DC fan. It's like being a DC fan versus being a Superman fan.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So, like, if you want to specialize in Superman, there's all kinds of stuff for Superman. And if you want to go bigger, or like being a Coltrane fan versus all of jazz, or a Mozart fan versus all of classical music, there's a shit ton of map stuff out there for every persuasion. So it's more like, what kind of stuff are you really, really geeky about? So
I'm sorry. There's some dude just walking up my street, which is a dead end. So I always am like, was that a mailman? Was that UPS? I don't know what that dude was. He was just walking down the street.
So
okay.
This is hour 2 now, which
we're
I mean, I'm not going anywhere. So
okay.
we can talk.
So it's always kind of been there. You get into design. At what point was the point where you were like, you know what, I want to design? What was it that made you want to create your own map? Your first one, the first one. And do you remember the first one you ever did?
Like in a professional sense?
Yeah.
Or in a, the first firm I worked at, one of their clients at the time, and this was right after, this is at a weird time. I joined this firm in the summer of 2004, and one of their clients, their local clients, was the Reagan Library. In the summer of 2004 is when Reagan died. So they were doing a ton of work that they couldn't tell anybody about because it was all NDA to hell. And so they were and that existed for at least a year, my first year there, that we couldn't tell anybody about the work that we were doing for the Reagan Library. And these days I wouldn't really tell people about it anyway, because I'm not a Republican. But the idea that you could work, you know, that we have a presidential library as on our client roster.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. Then they had, I think it was like 07 or 08, maybe a couple of years before that, like the next thing that they had, because, you know, after the president dies, the library's attendance will just swiftly crater. There's that. I mean, I don't know if it'll do that for Reagan, just because of Reagan's Reagan. But the next big exhibit that they had there was Air Force One. Like they have the old school Air Force One that I think, I'm pretty sure that Reagan and Bush and Clinton flew on it. I think Bush 2 got a new plane. But they have Air Force One. There's a giant hangar there and everything. And so one of the projects that we were assigned to do was the map of the library and the grounds and the environs. And that was also my exposure to, not only my exposure to doing illustrated maps and who should do them and who should not do them, but the idea of using Illustrator to make maps. Because going back to the Thomas guides, you could tell at a certain point, and I don't remember what year it was, but it was like 90 or 91 when they went from pixel-based to vector-based.
Okay.
Like, I didn't understand at the time. I was 12 or 13. It's like, well, why does this one look so different? So for the map of the Reagan Library, my art director at the time, she was using Illustrator for it, and there were a billion layers in there, and it gave her headaches every day, and she was at the point of tears. But I thought, why didn't why didn't you assign me this thing? Lady who owns the business, give me the map. You know that I like maps. Whereas like I'd only been working there for a year and a half. Why would she assign that to me? That was I did have a sense of entitlement about maps. But that was the first time that I saw that created in a graphic design sense and not with fancy data or projections or stuff, which I've still never there's a whole vast section of cartography that I will never be involved in just because I don't work with data. I don't work with the with geographic information systems, and maybe I could learn it, but I'm 44 and I don't want to jump into like something that detailed unless if I could get a job that would land me a really hefty salary if I had to learn GIS, I'll do that. But there are younger, smarter kids who know it already, who will get that job.
Is that does that delve into like the topographical side of having to do
Yes.
show elevation and stuff?
Yes, elevation or population or any kind of a data set.
Okay.
Election maps, that sort of thing.
Okay.
There's that 30 days of maps that I just did for November. That nominally is for cartographers who work with data.
Okay.
There's one of the prompts was hexagons, so just like express this data in hexagons. And like for a lot of, maybe they can. And a lot of them did that very well. Wasn't my thing. So we're speaking about niches before. That's why I was going to go into map illustration as my niche, because especially if it's static, there are a lot of things that I don't have to worry about. But there doesn't seem to be a humongous market for static maps anymore, even for weather maps. Like weather maps are the, like the glass slippers or the singles maps. They're inherently disposable, right? You only use them for a day and then they're done, or even a couple hours. But even those, motion. And sometimes I like just the idea of the map as an art piece, even if it's static, even if it doesn't do anything, just because it makes you sit with it a little bit more, and you can project onto it. You can project, but you can ascribe meaning to it. You can treat it as an art piece, which is something far more interesting to me.
But in doing what you do you feel like there's a reason to follow? Like, is there like a certain set of elements that need to be on a map to qualify it as a map, or are you thinking about it more from like an artistic side to where it may not need to have a legend or a northern arrow?
Right. There are debates about that. Does the map really need a key line? Does it need to have a border? No. And it's for somebody with a design background, well, there are ways to express a border. A frame around the map. You don't need to have a key line. Maybe you can just have the map be one color and the frame be white or something. Like there are things that we apply in graphic design that I see like a lot of cartographers do. A lot of cartographers care about typography, font weights, colors, color theory, all that, but a lot of them don't. And they don't make accessible or good maps. But maybe they just haven't learned that stuff yet either. So there are, like, do you need a north arrow? Well, not really. Do you need a legend? Or that was a big debate I remember happening. Do you need to have a legend or a key, or do you just make the symbology such that, or iconography such that it's intuitive and people know what that means?
Okay. Do you think part of what got you into maps is that it's kind of a mix of art and analytical?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Because there can be as many levels of meaning in it as you need there to be for your own mind or interpretation.
And like you were saying earlier about applying almost like sociology or culture to maps, as opposed to it just being, here's a set of streets and paths in this region.
Yes. Well, and that application of culture and bias and point of view is right there in the projections. Like if you use a Mercator projection, here's the thing. How designers gripe about Comic Sans or whatever, cartographers will gripe about the Mercator projection. Well, just like Comic Sans, Mercator projection does have a use. It's just used and abused so much that people have kind of taken it away from that use, and that use has been weaponized. The Mercator is great for sailing ships in straight lines. Notably, it's distorted at the poles. So the northern hemisphere, extreme northern hemisphere, and extreme southern hemisphere are huge and distorted. So that's where you get things like Greenland being the size of Africa, and all kinds of distortions about first world versus third world countries. And
so obviously, I know what the Mercator projection is.
Yes,
but for the listeners, I don't know what that is.
Okay, well, no, that's why I was trying to
okay,
trying to talk about it. Like
that's a Jimmy Pardo thing where he was like, "Now, obviously, I know what this is, but can you explain it to the other people?"
So you're just picking on me for doing that, right?
No.
Okay.
It's my own dumbness of like, I have no idea what this is. So
okay, well, here's another level of meta for that. So you know how there was Saturday Night Live picked on Papyrus with that Ryan Gosling skit.
Yes.
The West Wing picked on their Mercator projection.
I remember that.
Remember that scene where CJ says
they flipped it upside down.
Yeah, they flipped it up. North is a societal construct.
Yeah.
That's all. With everything, with all the first world biases and white supremacy biases and all that. North is a societal construct. But the thing about the West Wing sketch or the scene that really pissed me off was that they had this the one that the map nerds offered as a and this is probably fucking Sorkin too. They offered the Peters projection. The Peters projection is equal area to at some point, but it stretches the equator so that what we're used to seeing is now really tall and skinny. And so the poles take up the area that they're supposed to take up, but they're squished. So what people don't understand when they have, or maybe what they don't want to understand when they have fights about projections, is that all maps lie. That's the other thing. Maps lie. Maps lie just the way any statistics or graphics or anything else lie, because all of them are inherently trying to reproduce something that's impossible to do. Reproduce a sphere on a flat surface. Even a globe is a lie, right? Because it's so much smaller than the actual Earth itself. So that's the other thing too, is that you're trying to impose order on this thing that's way too big for human scale to comprehend.
Right. So are there other, like scale and size and Mercator projection, is there like a laundry list of problems with maps going back to the beginning?
These days, the laundry list, there's a whole big debate last year about the, map fail or carto fail hashtag, justifiably so. And it's the kind of things that would be used as gatekeeping for people who are just getting into the business. But they're just like in graphic design, we have all these things that set us off as quote unquote bad design. There are, the Mercator projection or rainbow color palettes, because those aren't necessarily representative of what you're trying to make them represent. Rainbow color palettes, projection fights, legends and keys versus intuitive iconography. What else? Presenting the names, I think, of different nations and cultures in their, like putting Russia in Cyrillic instead of Roman.
Okay.
Or which is what Google Maps is doing now. Google Maps does a lot of the Middle Eastern countries in Arabic or Farsi or Pashto or whatever the language is there, and then they have English. Maybe they have English underneath it.
Okay.
Which that's really cool. That would be cool for me as for people who understood both of those things. Side note here, but especially for those kind of countries, a lot of the Iranian, Afghan cities were established on sites that Alexander had established when he marched his Macedonians through there. So and all of them are down through the centuries, the way they're pronounced are corruptions of the word Alexandria, whether it's Kandahar in Afghanistan, Secunderabad in Pakistan, Alexandria in Egypt, Alexandria in Egypt. So that level of I like seeing those. That's where you can see the actual history happening on a map. Is when you see what a place is called now versus what it was called 500 to 1,000 years ago versus even before that. That's where you'll get some really fun educational and historical cultural perspectives on maps that people don't maybe use them for enough right now, or at least maybe they do, and I haven't been clued in yet. I still feel like I've not. When I started in design, since I didn't go to design school or art school, I felt like I kind of sneaked in the back door. And so that's kind of the way that I feel with cartography too, since I was only a geography major for a couple of years. I don't have a degree in it. I'm a really committed enthusiast.
Right.
And so there are the things that I like about it that, put my blinders on for things that other people really like about it. But that's such a humongous discipline that it encompasses all of that. It can encompass all of that. So there isn't necessarily, aside from those very superficial things, there are the same questions that there are in design. The organization, kind of like the AIGA of cartography, I think is called NACIS, North American Cartographic Information Society. And I went to their conference this year in October in a virtual way. And they're going through all the same convulsions that AIGA did, that a lot of other older organizations are doing as far as representation, white supremacy,
inherent bias,
all that stuff. And the way that and they're all dealing with it in the ways that they do. So there's a lot more going on in that area of cartography. Like one of the presentations was just by two Black women cartographers, and their project was just all about, okay, well, are there more people out there just like us? We want to find more Black female cartographers. Mm-hmm. And so that's how they use their cartography skills. It's just to find more people like them. And there was a massive presentation about. There's a lot of in social media circles. There's that thing of acknowledging the land that you're on, the Native American land that you're on. So, like I would say, I'm coming to you live from Shumash land, also known as Ventura, but a very specific section of Shumash land, because I don't remember why. I should look it up. So there are a lot of Native American and or indigenous voices. There's a presentation on that massive overlay on Google Maps of all the different Native tribes in their areas. So they're going through the same sort of thing. So it makes it seem like with those particular issues and the depth and breadth and just the sheer amount of discussion that needs to happen around those issues, it really makes other things like rainbow color palettes or projections seem very superficial.
Or fonts, yeah.
Or fonts. It's like, why are we arguing about Comic Sans when there aren't enough Black designers? Right. Period.
So is there anyone, or is that organization, or is this even possible, attempting to make an actual, honest to God, as close to perfect as possible map?
No, because that just the very definition of it does not exist. Because the way I was telling you before, every map is a distortion. Okay. Every map is a distortion of, to some degree or another. You will be excluding information, whether it's Google Maps showing, at a certain scale, maybe they'll only show you the state names, versus if you zoom in, then the county names will appear, then the city names will appear.
Okay.
just given the sheer amount of information there is and the sheer amount of history and breadth and depth of all this stuff, you're going to be excluding information at any given level. So it's just about the choices that you make, like, and how you present and defend those choices, the same way we do in design. I mean, that it is a design discipline, which is how I try to sneak in there.
Do you think like something like Street View has kind of devalued maps or the need for them?
Yes and no. I should send you the City Lab series that Laura Bliss did for the Atlantic, or for Bloomberg now, I think. But in the same column that she wrote about the Thomas Guide, she also wrote about Street View and how that is, or Google Maps, and how not just Street View, but GPS is basically invading neighborhood. Like, there's one particular neighborhood that she talked about in some area of Los Angeles where people were angry about it. Like, no, we have way too much traffic here now because people are using this as an alternative to the 210 when it's backed up. Yeah. And with all the, it was like, well, are they griping about that because they're a bunch of rich white people, or it's like my dad's mother, her whole neighborhood in Long Beach was destroyed by 405 when it was put in. And it's that goes back to the larger question of it too, and urban planning. And when I was in urban planning, we learned about Robert Moses and a whole, the horrible things and, racist and horrible things that he did in planning New York City, the modern New York City. And that's a whole other thing. But Street View, there are interesting things to see about that. Like it's useful for storytelling too. There's still Street View maps in for Ventura that will show the burn scar from the Thomas Fire from 2017. Okay. And where some of those houses have been rebuilt, many of them haven't. You can still see the empty lots and the burned out husks of those homes. So, or there's one where here's a personal one. Street View of my mother-in-law's house in Oceanside in California. When the car was going by, her golden retriever was outside. That dog has been dead for many years now. But Lehua is still out there in front, or at least she was 2 or 3 years ago when I checked this. The dog's still out there in front, smiling at the Google car as it drove by. So I mean, those things are something like, novelties, but on some level, whether it's, the fire damaged house or a beloved pet who's no longer with us, it's certainly, even if it's by accident, it's certainly a profound storytelling tool. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I hesitate to make value judgments on things like that we don't fully know the import of. I mean, we can make reactive judgments the way that people do to the Google Maps diverting traffic into their neighborhood. Right. But I don't know. I mean, it might just be my age. I'm less and less interested in making purist value statements about things anymore. I mean,
well, damn it, because I was about to ask another question of like,
go for it. I mean, because it's still. I am a white male, and we do those things, so that will probably happen.
I don't know what you're talking about.
That's because you sold out.
Yeah, I sold out long. Mm-hmm. What was it? I sold my soul long ago. Mm-hmm. Yeah. With everything being digital and stuff now, do you think there will come a time, like I'm looking at my record player, where all of a sudden physical maps will come back? Like,
oh, absolutely. Yes.
The Thomas Guide will make a comeback.
Yes. The relief map where you can run your fingers over the mountains. Yeah. And and those, I mean, certainly, those still have to exist for people who can't see. For the blind. That's a whole other thing that we haven't touched on that I don't really have enough experience with, was designing maps for people who are deprived of one of their senses in one way or another.
Disabled.
Maps with Braille on it, maps with relief for people who can't see. it's an amazing discipline that I don't have enough experience with. And there are definitely more experts out there. That's the thing though. It's like, it's such a humongous industry that, well, if you want to learn these things, those people are there, they're doing it.
Yeah.
I feel like, I shouldn't say this is in an imposter syndrome sort of way, but I really feel like a dilettante in a lot of ways for this stuff, just because I'm enthusiastic about what I'm enthusiastic about. And I don't know enough about the rest of it to speak credibly. But since I am also a self-centered, egomaniacal person, I will continue to speak about it regardless.
I was going to call you, like, when it comes to this, let's say a professional hobbyist.
Yes, that would work.
That's the polite way of saying, this is not my main gig, but damn it to hell, I'm passionate as shit about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in fitting with that, which is why I giggled in the beginning, because I have actually questions that I have been quietly asking throughout. Do you think there is a way, old men standing on front lawn shouting, like interactive maps or anything to get younger people to kind of understand the world as a whole? Because there's this weird thing of like, I feel like kids both understand a little bit more, but they're so focused on themselves or in their phones that it doesn't sink in as much. And I see a lot of, like, this was a big thing like 10 to 12 years ago where people were like, the kids who live in Iran don't give a shit about their parents or their grandparents' culture or food because they can go to McDonald's. And will that go away? Will that culture and food go away because those kids because of globalization?
Well, how many people do you know that speak Cornish now, right? Or Old Irish Gaelic. I mean, that's those things. Like they had to revive Irish Gaelic after the Free State became independent because people were not speaking it anymore, and now it's a part of it's something that's taught in Irish schools. How many? I use language as an example because that's one of the easiest things to die out. How many Native American tribes still speak their language? I mean, or I mean, I don't know. They probably do have some sort of education for it. But that's the thing that I think about as far as culture dying out. I'm sure that, like, I feel like those kids, say those proverbial Iranian kids, will get interested in their parents' or grandparents' culture at some point. Yeah. They will pick and choose what they want from it, just the way that we've done it from our parents and grandparents. We'll leave our parents' racism and homophobia, or whatever from those generations, even if our parents weren't like that.
I struggle a little bit because I grew up in the Black culture here, is seeing. Because I've known about this since I was a kid, of white people appropriating Black culture. So a good example, the best example for me that is easy is Nashville hot chicken. Hot chicken was a big thing in Black culture, where you have places like Prince's and Bolton's, but then you have places like Hattie B's, Party Foul, and I'm going to throw them all under the bus because fuck them, that are rich white people who are creating hot chicken restaurants. And to their credit, they are hiring Black people, but they're also hiring Black people as a front to, like, Wizard of Oz. Don't look behind the curtain that the people who are actually making money from this are a couple of white investment banker dudes. That's Hattie B's.
Yeah.
So, that's the only thing I worry about when it comes to all this shit is it going to be white people bringing back Iranian culture or Iranian food because it's cool,
Well, at least for food, it's taken me 44 years to get over the idea that food is just fuel. But like one of the columnists that I love to read all the time, mostly because he grew up in Orange County too, is Gustavo Arellano for the LA Times. And he is a major foodie, and he had this book called Taco USA, about how Mexican food conquered America or something like that. And he goes back to like where Taco Bell happened, or where, like, he talks about the taqueria in San Bernardino somewhere where the Taco Bell guy got his ideas. And if I remember correctly, it just, he goes into the whole, he spirals it out into the giant melting pot of what Los Angeles has become. It's, culinary wise, where it's just, 80 different languages are spoken in LA. All the different cultures come together to make LA its own culture. And it's not the same culture as it was when Tom Bradley was mayor, or when Rodney King was beaten, or when whatever. And there you have the like two major examples. Like Tom Bradley was a black man who was mayor of LA. And then, 10 years after that, Rodney King was beaten, and the whole and the riots happened, and it's a different Los Angeles now, in some ways, but it's also Gustavo's whole thing about that was using food as the equalizer, or as the storyteller, which is his great skill. But as far as the, I don't know. With maps, it seems like there's always going to be something for people to go back and get, where, we're still, for once you had, accurate satellite driven cartography, and you could see exactly what the land looked like. It's funny to go look at maps that show California as an island. However, when you go back and learn why California was named what it was, or why the misperception existed, and how long it took to fix that, and why that misperception existed, as far as having a different, like a Northwest Passage, or no, Northwest Passage was something different, but that took forever to die too, or the ways that people would map, say, the Mediterranean Sea before they knew about longitude. They would just, those old Portolan charts got the shape down pretty well. But those things ended up being just incredible works of art. And that's how they're looked at now, as art pieces, in addition to being historical pieces. So I think for cartography, there's always going to be something like that, where these things are going to live as long as they're available, in whatever form, digital or physical. There will be something that people can go delve into and dig into, and learn about the history or the culture, or the practicalities of why this map was made this way, or who it was made for, or who it excludes, or who commissioned it. Those kind of things. I think there's always going to be something like that, to get people to argue about.
Do you think there'll ever be a rectification of that argument, with satellites and everything able to almost get down to the fucking inch? Like, even the view from the satellite, like, all right, you can't keep arguing about the shape of the eastern shoreline, because we can literally,
you can see it. Well, if that satellite map, if that, down to the pixel accuracy of, say, the Santa Barbara Channel, can get you insight into what that thing looked like maybe 300,000 years ago, what faults and are moving in which direction, it might help with, earthquake prevention, or something like that. Or think about it this way. They talked about how, back when the genome was a thing, about how they mapped the genome. That's a map too. Or mapping, like looking at a blood cell through an electron microscope. There are going to be various creative interpretations of that word. So arguing about the coastline of
the Santa Barbara Channel,
it depends on how much the oceans rise, right? That's going to be a real estate fight pretty soon.
Yeah.
So California falling into the sea was always this big joke, but the way that cities are doing managed retreat, like Ventura is about its boardwalk and about the bike paths that are there, managed retreat versus putting up seawalls. Those are still, the coastline is going to be an argument, what it used to be and what it is now. So I think greater accuracy, as far as like what is the truth, according to, when it becomes something litigious like that, that's always going to be there. Anytime you can get accuracy that way is going to be good.
Because it's kind of ever evolving.
It's ever evolving
in certain areas.
Well, and when you go back to, here's another big thing that I wanted to get into. That I don't have the background other than enthusiasm for, but paleogeography. What the continental plates used to look like, what the world used to look like. I mean, it has literally been a different planet so many times in its life. Where not just the land was different, but because the land was different, the climate was different. And because the climate was different, the type of life was different. And it's all connected that way. And so there are so many different ways to dip your head in and poke around and see, even if modern maps get too accurate and boring, okay, we'll try and make a Cretaceous era map of California. Or was any of it above water at all? I mean, we're gonna have to find out. So I think there will always be something like that for people to be interested in and to enthuse over and argue about.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a great point of like the usage or the. It's almost like the evolving nature of maps is no longer, I don't want to say it's no longer historical perfection. It's what that means.
What it means and
what it means for the future,
just like design. Who's your audience? Is your audience, this specific group of people, or is it all time posterity?
Yeah.
I mean, if it even can be that anymore. Would there be a kind of a map to make, remember when I think it was Voyager or Pioneer, one of the satellites, where they sent out one of the probes where they put a record on it of all the, and the joke was always, they put classical music on it, they put rock and roll on it, and the joke was always, we got to find, Arecibo got a transmission back from Alpha Centauri. What does it say? What does it say? Send more Chuck Berry. So it's going to mean different things to different people, and
right.
For, I am not qualified to speculate on that. But as long as it's fun for the enthusiasts, it won't be bullshit for everybody else.
Okay, we'll come in for a landing here on this.
Okay,
so since I talked about this earlier, money's no object,
right?
Do you have a dream project in the back of your head? Or do you have one that you don't want to share? We can cut here.
No. I'll share. The only, it's just because it's my 2020 obsession because of quarantine. But my brother and I were planning this for a lot of last year too. It's when we finally started spiraling up our Dungeons and Dragons campaigns, for the first time in 30 years. I'm an insufferable nerd about this stuff right now, especially on socials. And if money were no object, I would continue to develop my own fantasy world in this found texture style of maps that I'm making, where I would, I take roadside detritus like tar and cement and stuff, and I turn that into landforms, imaginary landforms, or the Homeworlds project that I did, where I take a picture of an oil stain on the floor of my garage, and I turn it into an island using only, for Homeworlds, I think I was only using mobile apps. Like I only use PS Express and Instagram.
Okay.
To make a tar blob look like an island.
And do you have a white whale of a map or of a type of map? Because I know you're a music guy, so I'm sure we both have our white whales when it comes to vinyl or whatever. Oh, but when it comes to maps,
yes, I've actually scored a lot of my white whale vinyls. But so there are the stuff that I know that at least the stuff that I don't have has not yet been issued on vinyl. There are some stuff that I want from the mid-90s that's only been issued on cassette and CD.
Okay,
so I don't have a white whale map as far as acquisition. The one that if there's one that I haven't created yet, I don't know that exists either. I don't feel that pressure for this media and this discipline the way that I have for other things. And I think that might be why it still feels vital to me, is that I don't have the pressure to succeed in this or to create or to leave a mark the way that I did as an amateur musician or as a designer, or as a student or whatever. This is just, if money was no object, I would just get to explore the things that fascinate me about this field.
Okay.
And I'm not sure that I would get to do that if I was actually an employed cartographer working for something. If I was working for like a terrain modeling agency making maps for the U.S. Army, I'd have to confront my own, do I really want to do this for the Army or for, the military industrial complex?
And do their constraints make me hate doing this?
Yes. Whereas if it's just an art project for me, I can stop or start as needed.
Yeah.
And the only constraint is my time. So I don't know that I have a white whale for
I meant more for collecting. Like, is there a map? Like, it's like, I know I've shown you that one that was a nautical map, and I can't remember if I showed you the little book that it's like agriculture maps of East Tennessee.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't thought about them that way as far as something to possess.
I have an idea for something for you.
Okay.
The original schematics and maps for the highway system of LA.
Okay. Versus like the highway system of LA versus the red cars that were destroyed in the late 40s. Or,
yeah.
I'm still not sure that I would. Yeah, because I think about it this way: the town that I grew up in Dana Point, has a marina and a harbor that was built in the late '60s for pleasure boating. Before that, it was Killer Dana. It was the best break in Southern California for surfers, and my father-in-law and uncle-in-law surfed there when they were, and so they still hate Dana Point Harbor for what it did to that break. So there are maps of Dana Point or Dana Cove that say, if there was something that Richard Henry Dana made when he was first here throwing hides off the cliffs, that might be interesting, but then also not. I think it would have to be something momentarily exciting and or personal. So here's an example. When the USGS released a lot of their whole 20th century backlog of topo maps, they released it digitally. And so I had some fun going back, seeing what areas of California that I know looked like at different points. Like, what did Long Beach look like when my father was born there in 1948? What did UC Santa Barbara look like when my stepfather was there in 1970? What did Dana Point look like when my grandparents moved to South Laguna in 1965, when there were lima bean fields and nothing else. But those for me, those are like kind of momentary, not necessarily trivial things, but momentary curiosities.
Okay. Seeing that snapshot in time because it's not like that anymore. But that's a nice, if you want to build a story around that would be fun. It would be certainly interesting and worthwhile to a certain audience of people. But for me, it's sort of beyond the scope of what I'm interested in, what I'm enthusiastic about. Okay.
I mean, until it's not. Just because that map of South Laguna could send me down a rabbit hole of, this is where so and so. Well, there's a book about Dana Point that a woman did back in the late '80s, called Homeport for Romance, and it was a very silent generation boomer kind of touristy thing. But at the tail end, it has a section about the Ocean Institute in Dana Point Harbor, which is marine biology, history and stuff. And my brother worked at the Ocean Institute for a little while, for a couple of years in 2006 to 8. And he was on the historical immersion program, where you dress up like 1830s sailors and you scream at children who are there for the fourth grade California history lesson, where they stay on the brig Pilgrim for a night, and they learn about the way that the city was founded, or the way that those people lived. Several things about that. I was in that book. The kids that are lined up on the cement before they get on the boat, in that book is my fourth grade class.
Wow.
You can't see me specifically, but you can see my hat. You can see my mother. You can see all my friends from, this and that. And the thing I remember about that trip was I had 103-degree fever.
Oh, gee.
But I wanted to go on the trip because it was the thing to do. So that part of it is very personal to me. The other part is, and my brother worked there. And the final sad end of it is that the Pilgrim itself was neglected such that during the pandemic, it didn't get enough maintenance, and it sprang leaks and it sank. So it was at the bottom of the harbor back in April or May, and it was really sad. My brother had a hard time with that, justifiably so, and a lot of his friends who were in that program with him. And that's something that you'll never get from that particular book, because it was published in 1992. Just like any movie that's made about New York City before 2001.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You look at, even in that vein, you look at a film like After Hours and see like this, or even Taxi Driver, where you see two Scorseses, but you see that seediness of New York that anybody going now is like, no, it's like Disney World. It's like, no, it's not. It was not.
It was a funky place. Yeah. So those, as far as being gateways to those types of stories, those maps are invaluable. But they're only that. They're the touch point. They are the
and they're also like the maximum amount of knowledge that the creator wanted to share at that moment.
At that moment, for that place and time.
It could not be. It's not going to be 100% accurate, because they're going to have their own inherent biases. But it's just going to be a snapshot of that time in that person's head, or that committee's head.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
Yeah. Like when you go into the studio to make a song, this is a document. This is a physical document of this time that I spent in this place with these people doing this thing. Yeah. It's going to be different when we play it live 2 months from now. But this is this is the document.
I think about that when I went to Stax, and they went from having was it like a 2-track recorder to an 8-track recorder. And how that meant they could record more people live instead of YouTube record, all that. And how that completely changed, because exactly what you said, they were never in the same room recording at the same time. Like they had to, it morphed and changed when they played it live. Yeah. And maybe that when they went to the 8-track, they got to maybe document better how they did it live than... Or they could just make it, they could do overdub and overdub and overdub and overdub until they get it to be the best, most superlative version of that song that it could be at that moment, or for that budget, and then 10 years later with a 32-track or 64-track, or now digital with infinite. Yeah. Human ears are only so good. We're not going to be able to hear all 50,000 tracks. Anyway, tell that to Trent Reznor.
I'm not going to tell Trent Reznor anything. He can do what he's going to do. He's just, I heard it. I remember which one it was, but yes, you're Trent Reznor, and you made Head Like a Hole, but you also made a song that used Rain, Rain, Go Away in it. And I'm like, no, thank you.
Did he really? What was that?
Yeah. Oh, it's one of those old 89 era.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an older one.
Oh God. Yeah. Okay. I think that, yeah, it's either on Pretty Hate Machine or Sin, but I can't remember which one. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Now that we've devolved into critiquing Trent Reznor.
Yeah.
Dude. Nope. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thank you. This is like if I had a stronger butt, I could sit for a longer time.
I keep my weight distribution keeps pushing my chair down, so I constantly am like, "Damn it, just stay." But thank you for doing this.
Thank you for talking to me. Looking forward to hearing it later.